and waterproofing needs. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5, The Zone.
It is a Thursday on the Buck Reising Show. We've got everybody here except for Buck Reising. Alongside Lucas Panzica, I'm Will Boling. Brett Batchelor behind the glass making the show happen after the dulcet tones of Jonathan Schaefer. Get you ready for the show here today. Lots to discuss. The SEC Championship is one day closer. NFL Week 13 kicks off tonight with Taysom Hill at the quarterback position. And here in Nashville, the Battle of the Boulevard tonight between Belmont and Lipscomb. Good morning, Lucas. Welcome back.
Good morning. It's good to be back. It feels like my vacation has continued with no Buck Reising here. This is not coming back to work. This is an extension of my time off.
So you didn't have to scramble from about 9:30 to 10, tweeting out about 10 polls. How do you feel?
There was no scrambling this morning. I feel refreshed. I'll feel renewed on Monday when the polls do return. Looking forward to getting back into the swing of things with the Titans season when they start playing again and getting kind of back to normal. But this is a nice little reprieve here. I'm not going to lie.
How did you enjoy your time off? Which, of course, we all know. I preface this with the fact that even when we get time off, this time of year, it really isn't.
Right.
Unless you go to Egypt, which that's not really that's time off in a different way.
That's time off.
It's like work to get there, but that's getting far away from the daily routine.
Yeah, I took time. Yeah, in this time of year, we take time off to have more time to do other things, right? So I took some time off to be able to prep for high school state championships this weekend. Really looking forward to being on the call with you.
Yes.
Westview Hampton, the 2A state title. Get to see Alabama commit Ty Simpson at quarterback in action for the first time. So that was a lot of my time was spent doing that, taking care of some other stuff. But no, it's good to be back in here.
We will also be updating one of the best state championship games of the entire weekend. That's starting here in a couple minutes. I know Brent Doherty out in Chattanooga to watch his son Connor play for CPA against Lipscomb as the D2 AA state championship starts things off. New site and a stadium you're very familiar with in Chattanooga.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff over there for Chattanooga FC. Really cool facility. It's just cool for the kids. I mean, I think just to change the scenery every once in a while and play in just an environment like that, it's a really underrated facility, I think, Finley Stadium. UTC honestly has it pretty good over there for an FCS program. So good for the kids. I know a lot of teams are having to travel a good bit. In fact, Westview, the game we're doing, has to travel more than any other team that made it to Chattanooga this weekend. So that's quite a hike going from Martin, Tennessee to Chattanooga, Tennessee. But no, looking forward to it. Just a nice change of scenery for everybody.
It's going to be a fun weekend. Looking forward to following along with this game coming up here in a couple of minutes and hanging out with you this weekend in Chattanooga. I got to start the show here today, though, Lucas. We didn't talk about this. I'm just now remembering it. A tweet by Buck Reising last night. This was at 5:20 p.m. And it is a picture of what we know as Find My iPhone. It is Find My AirPods. And he has a left AirPod in North America, and his right AirPod is with him in Egypt. Can we just, count the humble brags just in this tweet? We have has an iPhone. We have has AirPods. We have is in another continent. I've never seen a more on-brand tweet in my entire life than this.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, Buck is in Egypt. I don't know how you could not know that. But yes, he and I will not ship over his AirPods to him. He hasn't asked me to do that because he knows that I will not do that.
Early on in the Buck Reising Show existence, he may have asked. He's now learned.
Yes.
Don't waste your time. 615-737-1045, our number. Tonight, the Cowboys and the Saints. No Alvin Kamara, no Ryan Ramczyk, no Teron Armstead for the Saints, according to a report from Ian Rappaport. Oh, Buck Reising on YouTube right now, yelling, "Get me my AirPod, Lucas." Go away.
No.
Take your time off. Saints have lost 4 straight for the first time since 2015. Taysom Hill will start at quarterback behind a makeshift offensive line, which I guess is smart when you want to put a wide receiver in quarterback. It's because you don't really have anybody to block for him.
Well, the Saints, and this is courtesy of Nick Underhill, who covers the New Orleans Saints. The Saints are going to be without QB1, RB1, wide receiver 1, tight end 1, right tackle 1, left guard 1, and left tackle 1 offensively tonight against the Bills.
Otherwise, what the Titans call Tuesday.
I was going to say, Titans fans.
Titans call that week 4.
You are not alone. That is insane, and it makes sense why Taysom Hill will be in there because, as you said, he's a guy who can run away from all the pressure he'll be facing from that Bills front without RT1, LG1, and LT1 on offense tonight against the Bills.
Tennessee Titans said, "Hold my training table, hold my soft tissue." Goodness.
Oh no.
Mike McCarthy out as well. At least 6 coaches, 2 players with a COVID-19 outbreak for the Cowboys. So that is the beginning of the football weekend coming up tonight between the Saints and the Cowboys. Fun show coming up for you here today, though. We've got a lot to cover over the next 3 hours. We're going to talk a little bit of college football coaching carousel coming up here in a couple of minutes and see if there really is a defined loser in everything that has happened. We love losers on this show. That's what we're going to try to figure out and see if there is one that kind of stands out above the rest. Coming up at 11:20, we've got Belmont head basketball coach Casey Alexander. His team comes back from the ESPN Events Invitational, where they finished second to a very good Dayton team. We'll get the full report from him as they go into a big matchup tonight against Lipscomb in a game that has always been a staple in Nashville, Lucas. But Casey Alexander, who spends 6 seasons at Lipscomb, helps elevate that program. Obviously comes back to coach's alma mater, Belmont. It's well documented the success that they have had under him over the past couple of years. And now a year before they moved to the Missouri Valley, a really intriguing matchup between 2 good basketball teams tonight in Nashville. Yeah,
and a matchup that you're just so glad has been preserved over the years and over the decades. There's so many rivalries in college basketball with conference realignment and teams stepping up in division and all these things that get eliminated and just get sent into the ether because of the changes in the sport. Belmont and Lipscomb is not one of those. And I hope that never, ever changes because going all the way back to whenever this rivalry started, whenever it was them 2 and Trevecca, kind of the trifecta of college basketball in Nashville, going head-to-head, and then things change, programs evolve, they grow, but those 2 have continued to play year in and year out, and the ties are there with Coach Alexander. So, yeah, looking forward to talking to him.
Nick Muzinski was terrific in Belmont's tournament down there in Orlando. So looking forward to talking with Coach Alexander about that team.
And Lipscomb's had a nice year.
Yeah, they have.
Lipscomb went on the road and beat a really good Dayton team, a Dayton team that Belmont just fell short against. So I think we're in for a good matchup tonight.
Absolutely. Coming up at 12:20, we will talk to Blake Toppmeyer from the USA Today Network. Lucas, I can never remember an SEC championship where I had a worse read on than this one.
Yeah. I mean, think about this. You've got, when you're looking at Alabama, the advantage in head coach, Alabama. The advantage at the quarterback position, Alabama. Georgia's a 1-touchdown favorite. When's the last time we saw something like that going into a game of this caliber?
When Georgia broke out the black jerseys against Alabama in, what year was that? 11?
Yeah, when they got just completely demolished.
Destroyed. Yep.
Yeah.
That was the last time we've seen Alabama be an underdog like this.
It's crazy because Kirby Smart was hired by Georgia to go over and build Alabama East, and that's exactly what he's done. Georgia 2021 is Alabama 2011 or 2012 or 2015 or take your pick, basically right up until this past national championship in 2020. So I'm fascinated by this. The idea to just write off Alabama and is insane to me, even with some of the weaknesses we've seen, the deficiencies and inconsistencies we've seen from them this year. But there is that possibility that they'll just be smothered and not be able to run the ball. They're banged up at running back. But just that dynamic right there of Nick Saban and Bryce Young, a Heisman contender, and still Georgia is the clear-cut favorite.
2008, the season that Georgia was the clear favorite over Alabama. They wore the black jerseys. Alabama was coming off a 7-6 season the year before.
Yeah, it was year 2 of Nick Saban in 2008.
And that was officially the beginning of the Nick Saban era.
Yeah, the beginning of this new Alabama dynasty.
They would lose to Florida in the SEC championship back in 2008, a team that would go on to win the national title. But that was an interesting game. I don't think that's going to happen this time.
No, I mean, you could draw a lot of parallels there, too, because 2008, Alabama with a good run, they get to the championship game. They can't get over that hump of Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow and the Florida Gators. They go right back in 2009, and they get over that hump emphatically, a dominant winner for Georgia in the SEC championship. Or I'm sorry, over Florida. Now,
Yeah.
that's what Georgia's trying to do, right? They haven't been able to get over the Nick Saban hump. They've won an SEC championship in Kirby Smart's time, but they still haven't been. What'd they do? They lost to Alabama in the national championship game in the college football playoff. So Georgia's trying to do in 2021 what Alabama was able to do in 2009, returning to the SEC championship game and going head-to-head.
I thought this was interesting before we go to break, Lucas, that Georgia has played Alabama in Atlanta 3 times. 2012 and 2018 SEC championships. In the 2018 national championship game, Georgia has covered all 3 of those games.
It's
That was
crazy
interesting.
that this is the 3rd time only ever that they'll be playing in Atlanta.
It's 4th time.
4th time ever.
Yeah, 3rd time in an SEC championship. 4th time if you include the 2018 college football playoff national championship game. So, going to be a great matchup, and we're looking forward to breaking that down with Blake Toppmeyer of the USA Today Network coming up at 12:20. Lots to get into, but when we come back, Lucas, we take a look at the craziness that has gone on in the coaching football carousel. We've had the chance to talk about it with the rotating hosts here on the show all week. This is your first chance to react to all of the craziness. Brian Kelly, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Lincoln Riley. We'll get into that. And the question is, Lucas, who is the biggest loser out of the college football coaching carousel? We've got 2 different answers in 2 totally different directions. We'll get into that. You can join us at 615-737-1045. It's the Buck Reising Show right here, 1045 The Zone. Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone. Great to have you with us as we talk some college football along with Lucas Panzica. I'm Will Boling. Buck Reising dramatically in our YouTube chat, which I've never known Buck to be dramatic or at all, says, I tuned in for the show for a minute and hear them slandering my name. I'm paraphrasing, but I'm not paraphrasing. He said, back to the Saharan shadows. Good Lord. How do you put up with this man every day?
Oh, we find ways. He's not that bad.
No, I'm kidding. I'm just so used to I have to get my shots in while I can because I'm so used to starting my workday around this time. And once or twice a week, I'll get tweets of or just texts from random people I haven't talked to since I was like a kid. Of people like, wow, they're really saying some bad things about you on the radio right now. And I'll be like, oh, it must be time for the, yes, 10:20. It's time for the Buck Reising Show.
When the Braves come up. So whenever the Braves come up, you come up around here.
I walked into the studio the day after the Braves won the World Series, and Buck is unfurling his cord to plug in his computer and everything. And I look at him with a big smile on my face because I was so happy. I still kind of am. And I said, Buck, they've really come a long way from me yelling at them to send down Alex Jackson to AAA in May during your show. And he was like, do you really think I care about this right now? I have a show to do. He's like, the Cowboys have COVID. You really think I care about your Braves right now? Get out of here. Get out of my space.
It's unfortunate, but those were kind of the conversations that were had before the show that day.
615-737-1045. Good Lord.
Man, the Braves won the World Series. We got to Cowboys got COVID. Scrap it.
So, losers of the college football carousel. There are lots to choose from here, Lucas. There are fan bases. Oklahoma, one that comes to mind of a fan base that has not have had a coach leave for another college football program since 1947, which is unbelievable. You have lots of unorthodox fan bases that are having to come to terms with what this is like. And I feel like I have been teaching a master's course in Coaching Search 305 over the past 2 days. So I'm excited to welcome you into my classroom as us Tennessee graduates preach to the masses on how you process coaching searches, because I'm learning quickly that none of the fan bases that are having to do it right now know what this is like.
I agree. Who do you think has had a ruder awakening, Oklahoma fans or Notre Dame fans?
It's Oklahoma.
Just
Oklahoma.
Because I guess Notre Dame has some sort of stability there, right?
Did you see the tweet that I posted of the Oklahoma fan that gave 5 reasons why Lincoln Riley is worse than Satan?
Worse than Satan.
Oh, it's
yes,
terrific.
They're going through the however many stages of grief after a coaching change that Tennessee fans know all too well. No, you're right. It is Oklahoma because it's so layered what's happening to them right now, because you had what you thought was a lifer in Lincoln Riley. Now, Notre Dame thought it had that as well in Brian Kelly, and I wonder if Brian Kelly himself thought he was a lifer a month ago at Notre Dame. This all happened very quickly. But you have that with Lincoln Riley up and leaves in the middle of the night to what Oklahoma fans would say is a lateral move, right? From Oklahoma to USC. But not only that, the damage your recruiting class is going to take with the amount of Southern California prospects currently committed to Oklahoma, some of which have already decommitted, like blue chip 5-star prospects that they were so excited about. Transfer portal, that's going to have an impact. And they still don't have a new head coach. So with Notre Dame, I guess there is some stability there, right? Marcus Freeman's been elevated. I think Tommy Rees remains on that staff, maybe with a bigger voice. Suddenly Notre Dame is younger with new exciting coaches moving forward to lead that program. Oklahoma right now is still in disarray. Feels like Notre Dame rebounded a lot quicker than Oklahoma did as a program. That change happened after Lincoln Riley left.
615-737-1045. If you've got the biggest loser of the college football coaching carousel, Dallas on YouTube chiming in saying the Notre Dame football players only because they had to be up at 7 for a meeting that lasted 4 minutes.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, unfortunately, the players are the losers in these situations, but especially when you look at freshmen that were sold on a vision, that's just the way of the business. But yes, that's messed up, man. Just send an email or make it optional or something. I would be so mad if I had to get up and walk into that meeting at 7 o'clock and Brian Kelly's out of that room at 7:02. And I'm thinking, what are we doing here?
I'm thinking of players tired, hoods up, walking into a meeting, thinking all right, I got an 8 a.m. class. We'll go to this, meeting, and then it ends 4 minutes later. You're like, all right, well, now I have an hour to kill, and I'm awake.
Do you think?
Might as well just go back to sleep and not go to the 8 a.m. class.
Do you think he just recited verbatim what was in that message that he sent to the team? The men, my love for you. You think it was just word for word, and then he walked out?
It was Dwight Schrute walking into the office saying, I state my regret.
Yes, yes.
Well, you couldn't have memorized that? I could not memorize it because I did not mean it.
Yeah.
I did not feel it. 615-737-1045. So my loser from the college football coaching carousel is Notre Dame. And it's not just the team. It's just Notre Dame. Because this is an 11-1 team that still has a very real chance of making the college football playoff. That now, according to the committee, in their conversations with ESPN and then the conversations they had the other day after these rankings, a team that's going to be judged differently because its head coach isn't there. Now, this is part of the protocol and what the college football playoff does to evaluate teams. And, Lucas, I think this is mainly made for the situation Notre Dame saw firsthand last year when Trevor Lawrence is hurt. He has COVID against Notre Dame. So the Clemson loss to Notre Dame last year was judged differently because they didn't have their quarterback. We have now opened Pandora's box to how is a team judged when a head coach leaves but is still being evaluated for the college football playoff. That's the situation we have right now. So in the short term, the hope that Notre Dame was sold might be just gone. But in the long term, you have a guy that has been there for a long time. He's won a lot of games. He hasn't won New Year's 6 games. He's 0-5 in New Year's 6 and above games. But he knew that he reached his ceiling in what is supposed to be a blue blood program. We talked about this with Austin Stanley yesterday. In the short term and in the long term, Notre Dame has no hope right now. And it's the worst part about college football, the fact that what is supposed to be a tier 1 program has their guy leaving to go somewhere else because they know I can only win a national championship if I go somewhere else.
That has to be a tough pill to swallow, right? When you think about the winningest coach in Notre Dame history. This guy has won more games than Lou Holtz, right? Than Newt Rockne, the greatest coaches in that program's illustrious history. And he realized he hit his ceiling. And his ceiling was, like you said, losing New Year's 6 college football playoff games.
Right.
That has to be a tough pill to swallow for the program, for players, for the fans that realize the best coach in our history didn't think he could do any more than he's already accomplished. And that does not include a single championship for Notre Dame. So that's a tough pill to swallow. I agree with you on that, but they have some stability there moving forward. We saw a clip of Tommy Rees, the 29-year-old former Notre Dame quarterback, now offensive coordinator, talking to the team, telling them he's not leaving, that he believes they can still win a national championship there. But no, that is, you're right. They come away from this, as much as we say Oklahoma fans have had the Rooter awakening, Oklahoma can be sparked back up into the national championship conversation any year, especially as long as they remain in the Big 12. For Notre Dame, I don't know that you can say that.
It's just interesting the convergence of factors you have at Notre Dame. Brian Kelly has never recruited better than 9th in his recruiting class, according to the 247 Sports Composite. He's got all of these academic requirements that make it harder for him to recruit blue chip prospects. And that makes him such an interesting fit at LSU as well, because walking into somebody's house in Metairie, Louisiana is a lot different than recruiting the Midwest.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to talk to Blake Toppmeyer about this, though. I feel like a lot has been made about this perceived fit with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame.
Well, and Coach O was the fit.
The fit.
He crashed and burned.
You literally could not create a better fit.
I know. I'm with you.
And we saw what happened there. So in terms of fit, what are we talking about here? Because I think of the winningest coach at one of the top programs in college football history in Notre Dame, a coach that, to me, you have to take never done better than 9th in the country in recruiting. You got to take that with a grain of salt, with the challenges that were put in front of them that are basically all wiped away now at LSU as far as academic challenges in the region. He's surrounded by a much better talent pool than he was in South Bend, Indiana. So fit is one of those words that's been tossed around a lot that people just sort of assign to geography or personality. I don't think those things matter as much as people think it matters. When Butch Jones left Tennessee, I mean, what was a pretty common thread among Tennessee fans, right? We need a good Southern ball coach, right? Jeremy Pruitt comes up. He loves cornbread. He's just a good old ball coach, and we know what happened there.
Football guy.
And now
he's one of us.
Now they've got a head coach from South Dakota that is doing a pretty good job. So we'll talk a little more to Blake Toppmeyer, USA Today. He'll join us at 12:20 about this perceived fit, because there's going to be some shortcomings with Brian Kelly and that fit, but I want to know, asking Blake, where those come, where those will fall. Because when you think about his relationship with this new AD, Scott Woodward, those guys are going to get along great. I think they're kind of cut from the same cloth. So there's a lot of layers there when you talk about fit with a program that has the expectations LSU has.
615-737-1045 if you want to jump in on your biggest loser of the college football coaching carousel. Lucas, you, though, are headed to a different conference with your pick.
I'm going west. My biggest loser of the college football coaching carousel is a program that really hasn't had anything to do with the coaching carousel in the last couple weeks. That's Oregon. Now, Mario Cristobal has done a fantastic job at Oregon. 35-12 in the last few years. Pac-12 titles in 2019 and 2020, although you take the 2021 with kind of a grain of salt. They went 4-3 that year, and then obviously an abbreviated season. But you couldn't get into the playoff. Now you've got Lincoln Riley in Southern California. The flashiest hire that USC has made since, Lane Kiffin, right?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly the best pedigree of any hire USC has made since Pete Carroll.
For sure.
Because Clay Helton, that's pretty bland. So for me, it's Oregon. I mean, a playoff spot out of the Pac-12 has been served up on a silver platter for the last X amount of years, and Oregon has dropped the bag.
Yeah, and you feel like you've got a shell of Chip Kelly, who's over there at UCLA. You've got Kalen DeBoer going to Washington, bringing his quarterback with him from Fresno State, who started his career at Washington, which is a wild storyline as well.
Yeah, I wonder if that's ever happened before.
I don't think it has. But I would be fascinated. Surely not. Because this is the first full offseason with one-time transfer and NIL.
Yeah.
So, again, we don't really have the proof of concept for the next steps in a coaching carousel like this. We were talking about this before the show. I feel like the timing of when all of these hires are being made is indicative of an offseason that no one has ever seen before, of a full offseason of NIL that obviously starts on July 1st. We don't really know what's going to happen next.
No, this is the most pivotal 12-month period that we've ever seen in the NCAA, especially in college football.
It's fantastic.
I mean, it was the most pivotal summer we've ever seen in college football because of what you just said, especially NIL. And now the craziest coaching carousel we've ever seen. A lot of that you could probably attribute to the way the early signing period is set up, to where they got to make a move now because they're signing guys in December, not in February. So I wonder if that was still the case, if signing day was still in February, you didn't have the early signing period, maybe we'd have the same things happening this week, but it would be happening in January, and it wouldn't have that impact on the college football playoff conversation. It's crazy to me that is a conversation, that Notre Dame's status can be affected in the college football playoff because their head coach left for another program. That's not a conversation we've ever had to have in college football,
it's
in
really
the
not.
BCS or anything else. No matter which side you think of it, if you think it should affect how the committee views the Irish or it shouldn't, it's still insane that we're in that spot, that it has any impact, and that we're even talking about their postseason hopes being dependent on whether or not the committee, how they view Notre Dame because of the fact their coach up and left for the SEC.
615-737-1045, our number. We go to the phones where Frying Pan is in Dixon to give his loser in college football. What's going on, Frying Pan?
Hey, I'll take your suggestion of Oklahoma, and I'll raise you former Tennessee players that play at Oklahoma as the biggest losers. They thought they were getting out of Knoxville, the debacle, the dumpster fire of Tennessee football, and they went to what is been a dumpster fire of a coaching search in Norman, Oklahoma. Now, I just find it funny because I'm a Tennessee fan, and I don't ever wish any ill will on anybody. And these guys are probably the guys that took money, Key Lawrence, Wanye Morris, Eric Gray, but those guys they're probably sitting there thinking, what's going on here? Am I just cursed? Hey,
I think Frying Pan cut out there, but it's a point I hadn't thought of yet.
Yeah, that is a good point.
The players always end up being the losers in these
Yeah.
situations because they're not being paid seven figures. I mean, some of them are, I guess, but 1% of them are being paid like college football coaches. It's a good point.
It is, and the way I look at it is not so much because he's right. I mean, those guys obviously are looking at themselves saying, my goodness, what do I have to do to go to a stable college football program? I went to, two programs that are in the top 10 in wins in college football history.
Is this a me problem?
Yeah, is it me? What's happening?
What's going on here?
But I do look at it in the prism of Tennessee can certainly maybe get back at Oklahoma a little bit here. I mean, there's an opportunity to be had when it comes to Jadon Hazelwood, a guy who Tennessee was in the mix for coming out of Hoover, Alabama at wide receiver, a blue chip prospect. He's in the transfer portal. There's going to be more to come out of Norman. So I kind of frame it more so in that way, that I wonder if Tennessee decides to swoop into Norman the way Norman swooped into Knoxville last offseason.
Let's go to Brandon in Murfreesboro next up with his biggest loser of the coaching carousel. What's going on, Brandon?
Hey, I'm going to take this in a little bit of a different direction. I think the biggest loser is Clark Lee. I would imagine he woke up the other day and was like, man, if I would have just stayed one more year, I would probably be the head coach of Notre Dame right now instead of the football purgatory that's known as Vanderbilt football. And they loved him up there, and I think had he stayed another year as defensive coordinator, he'd probably be the head coach of Notre Dame today. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Brandon. Taking the words right out of our mouth of where we're about to go with that next. That's a great answer.
It is.
And it's an interesting situation for Clark Lee, obviously coming back to his alma mater here at Vanderbilt. But I just think the way this season goes this year for him, you go 2-10, you're looking over and saying, wow, that grass is a lot greener over at Notre Dame, where he probably is the head coach right now.
Yeah, I don't know that head coach is thinking that way. I think Clark Lee is looking forward, right? This is the spot he's in. And,
right.
And you go back to a year ago, I think he makes that decision 10 times out of 10. His hometown, right next to his high school and MBA, his program where he played, a guy who I think really embraces the challenges at Vanderbilt. But you do look at it and you say, he probably would have been the head coach, right? It stands to reason that if the 35-year-old defensive coordinator that replaced him and has only held that job for one season was elevated fairly quickly. In fact, Notre Dame didn't even place an interim there. They didn't even place Marcus Freeman as the interim. I wonder if that was in the back of their minds all along when we've heard from their athletic director. It's not a surprise. He heard some Freudian slips, right, from Brian Kelly. He wasn't surprised that he up and left. So I'm sure that has been in the back of their minds and what they would do in that scenario. And if Clark Lee is still on Vanderbilt's staff, certainly it stands to reason from what's happened in the last couple of weeks, he would be the head coach on Notre Dame staff. He'd be the head coach at Notre Dame right now.
Marcus Freeman is an interesting guy, and reading this SI.com article about him, he's the best recruiter at Notre Dame since Urban Meyer, which is crazy to think about. Urban Meyer, an assistant coach for the Fighting Irish from 1996 to 2000. And Marcus Freeman, a guy who's recruited Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, Texas, and Alabama. It's really interesting, this hire. And I think there's more of a proof of concept for this in college basketball than there is college football. And it's kind of a Penny Hardaway kind of hire for Notre Dame. That's kind of what this reminds me of a little bit.
Yeah, but I do like the hire from Notre Dame because when you look at recent blue blood programs that have elevated or hired coaches in their 30s, young guys,
without a doubt,
like Marcus Freeman, has it not worked out? I mean, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma was, 34 years old when he was hired? Ryan Day, Dabo Swinney at Clemson. So this is a trend that we're starting to see a little bit in college football, and it's not just Marcus Freeman. It's Notre Dame's staff as well. So I like the hire from the Irish.
I do too. I think it makes sense. How does the Cincinnati part of this change this process?
That's what's amazing, right? That we've had the most bonkers college football coaching carousel that we've ever seen in our lifetimes. And Luke Fickell's still at Cincinnati, and Matt Campbell is still at Iowa State. The names that perennially come up each and every year, when it feels like the last 5 seasons, to be that next guy to take a step up and take over a big-time program. And Notre Dame and Luke Fickell, we always talk about him being a Midwest guy. Well, that would have made sense. Now you feel like the only job Luke Fickell's leaving Cincinnati for would be what? Ohio State, right?
That's been the conversation about Fickell, is that he would leave for 2 jobs, Ohio State and Notre Dame.
Check one of those off.
There you go.
And John Bryce has been telling us, he joins Blaine and Mickey really often a football scoop. That dude is so dialed in. He works out of South Bend. He was the first to bring up Brian Kelly to LSU earlier this week on Blaine and Mickey. He's been telling us for I don't know how long, Marcus Freeman's going to be a big-time head coach sometime. And this is months ago. This is weeks and months ago. Marcus Freeman is going to be a head coach at the Power 5, big-time college football level. It's just a matter of whether it's at Notre Dame or somewhere else. Well, it's going to be at Notre Dame.
Coming up, there's been an interesting trend on the kinds of hires college football programs have been making that I think will surprise you. You think of these young, up-and-coming coaches, but a lot of programs are going in a different direction this season and over the past year. I'm going to take a look at some of the numbers of this from an Adam Rittenberg piece at ESPN that I think you all will find interesting. Got Casey Alexander, Belmont basketball coach, coming up at 11:20. Lots to discuss. It's the Buck Reising Show right here, 104.5 The Zone. Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone, alongside Lucas Panzica, Brett Batchelor, our producer. I'm Will Boling. Getting into the losers of the college football coaching carousel, of which there are many. But as of Wednesday morning, 14 FBS schools had made new coaching hires, and the average age of those head coaches, 49.4. This is really interesting. The cycle has featured 4 coaches 60 or older in New Mexico State's Jerry Kill, UConn's Jim Mora, Don Brown at UMass, and, of course, Brian Kelly as well at LSU. Only 3 schools have hired coaches under 40. One of those, obviously, is Lincoln Riley, who doesn't really count as an under 40 head coach because he just completed his 5th season as a head coach at Oklahoma. Technically a young guy, but not really. And if Oregon offensive coordinator Joe Moorhead ends up at Akron, which is possible, that trend will continue. He's 48. So only 5 hires so far, Lucas, are first-time head coaches. And this would include 6 when Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame kind of gets added to that mix. So you've got Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. You have Joey McGuire at Texas Tech, Rhett Lashley at SMU, Jake Dickert at Washington State, and Sonny Cumbie at Louisiana Tech. Kind of interesting how many older head coaches have been hired in this cycle.
Yeah, Jerry Kill. Still
Gosh,
going at it. That's awesome.
That's a name and a half right there.
Yeah, no doubt. Jim Mora. I love these names getting revived. Hell, Bob Stoops is going to be coaching a football game in December whenever Oklahoma has their bowl game. We'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know where they're going to end up. I guess it'll be a New Year's Six bowl. But, I mean, Bob Stoops coming out of retirement, so to speak, to help them out, coach the bowl game, help this transition. He's 61. He's a year older than Nick Saban. Or I'm sorry, he's 10. What am I saying? He's like 10 years younger than Nick Saban.
Yeah.
Saban's about 70.
Right.
So Bob Stoops, the idea that he's just, aging Oklahoma legend that is coming out to help them. Bob Stoops could probably do that job right now.
No doubt.
I don't know if he's got an itch or not. I find it interesting. Usually when you retire, you're done. This is not Barry Alvarez stepping down from his AD spot to lead Wisconsin during a bowl game. This is Bob Stoops stepping away from television and retirement to help out Oklahoma during a bowl game. I don't think Bob Stoops is going to coach Oklahoma moving forward, but it just kind of tells you how young Bob Stoops was when he retired to go against that trend a little bit.
He's like the Andrew Luck of coaching.
Yes.
That's basically what it was.
That is what it is.
Left on top. That's a guy, too, that is going to get paid $325,000 to coach the bowl game. And I saw somebody retweeted that and said, Tennessee paid Kevin Steele $900,000 to eat the snacks in the break room.
Yeah, do a couple smoothies.
How quickly we forget that that's something that happened. Good Lord.
Oh, man.
615-737-1045 our number. We talked about this with Grant Ramey yesterday on the show. This is the kindest Tennessee has ever been to people in our job as far as always having something to talk about that isn't just completely negative. Like, there has not just been like a, oh, crap, disaster moment that Tennessee has grown accustomed to over the past couple of years. The entire year, other than the Caden Salter kind of situation over the summer, that was kind of it. When you felt like you had a disaster going on and, oh, my gosh, this is the worst case scenario. But you have Tennessee baseball winning more games and kind of prolonging or really I should say shortening the offseason of football. You have a pretty good basketball program that is just good enough to have attention, but bad enough to where people want to talk about it and react to it. You have a football program that exceeds expectations, and now you have a basketball program that looks like they're kind of clicking on all cylinders and figuring things out right now with the best point guard in the country at a high school in Kennedy Chandler. So it's kind of interesting watching this from afar. It's like the SpongeBob meme of watching Squidward watching Patrick and SpongeBob run around and just looking from a window far above of just, wow, everyone else is melting down and we're not.
Are Tennessee fans like deep down like feeling a little bit of FOMO with the coaching searches?
I think they are.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think they absolutely are.
Nobody's going to trade away stability, certainly, but I think there's a little part of everybody that says, man, I'd really love to be tracking a plane right now.
And I think you saw that when Josh Heupel was linked to the Oklahoma job briefly.
What was there? Oh, yeah.
You saw Tennessee fans be like, hold.
Start to light up.
Everyone hold. Grant Ramey told us yesterday, we already had texts like, all right, who's on the hot board?
Yeah, light the beacon.
It's hot board season. Gosh, I know generally people listening to us don't really care about like our jobs. Like they just want to be entertained. They don't care about like the how. There's probably like a pretty small audience that like actually cares about what I'm talking about right now. That's probably the case most times. But it is really good for business. It's fun to watch from a unbiased point of view when there is a coaching search. Like looking at those page views when working in digital media and writing when I was in college and covering that
in 2017
in 2017 covering that search.
Yeah.
There's nothing better for business.
Yeah.
Than a football search.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was on the radio in Knoxville during that time, and I don't remember a time where phones were loaded more than during that coaching search, because it was not only every day was there a development, every day there was like 3 to 4 developments. And I think Oklahoma is going through a light version of that right now. Not as much as leaking out. I don't think that's going to be handled as embarrassingly as it was at Tennessee with John Curry and the sort of gap there between Curry and his bosses and what they were looking for and going off the map for hours on a plane with no Wi-Fi. I don't think we're going to get that type of stuff here, fan revolts, all that good stuff. Nobody does a coaching search like Tennessee.
Bucket on Twitter tweets us and says, FOMO over the coaching madhouse, that's a big fat no. It's one of those things.
Look inward, Bucket.
Tennessee football
there's
fans,
a part of you.
It's kind of like the girl that you knew in college that loved the mean guy that just was rude to them from the fraternity that you hated. It's like the girl that doesn't know what's good for her in college. That's like Tennessee football fans right now with coaching searches. It's like Tennessee fans are like, wait, but they're mean to me. I feel like I can fix them. I feel like I can fix these coaching searches. I will be what gets over the hump for them. I feel like that's the comparison.
It's the adrenaline.
It's
the rush of keeping up with the coaching search and the hope that is sold to you during a coaching search.
It's starting your day on VolQuest.
Yeah.
It's all right. What's Brent Hubbs got for us today? Here we go.
That's what Oklahoma fans are going through right now. It's comparing the coach that left to Satan. That's what coaching search season is to its core.
I think I've mentioned that every day I've been on this show this week because it's nothing describes the sport, which I love more than any other sport in the world, than Oklahoma fans on message boards comparing Lincoln Riley to Satan, and one of the points being Satan would never move to California.
Right, and it's not like a angry fist in the air like Riley, Satan, like it's nothing like that. It's a calculated, broken down, point by point explanation of why you can make the argument that Lincoln Riley is worse than Satan. And it feels like in this guy's head, he is very calculated. And he's like making some good points, saying people will listen to this.
It was really proud. News 2 tweeted us earlier this week and said, I love nothing more than reasonable explanations of completely unreasonable things.
Yeah.
To which I responded, you just described our jobs.
Absolutely.
That's what Sports Talk Radio is.
That's what coaching search season is.
615-737-1045, our number. Coming up, we will shift gears to college basketball in a couple of minutes with Casey Alexander, head coach of the Belmont Bruins, previewing the Battle of the Boulevard tonight. But Lucas, after the break, we get into another victory lap for Tennessee fans yesterday. The year of what Jeremy Pruitt dubbed the decade of the Vols. Hasn't really gone according to his plan, but a loss that Tennessee fans celebrated with an aggression that I think was appropriate. We'll get to that next. Coming up. It's the Buck Reising Show. 1 hour down, 2 to go on 104.5 The Zone.
It is 11:01. Good morning. I'm Jonathan Schaefer. Right now in Chattanooga, Blue Cross Bowl Division II 2A matchup between two great teams, Lipscomb Academy and CPA. As we're heading into halftime, Lipscomb Academy, Trent Dilfer's squad with the 7-0 lead over CPA. We'll have continuous coverage of the Blue Cross Bowl championship games throughout the day today on 104.5 The Zone. According to reports, Notre Dame defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman has emerged as the leading candidate to become the Fighting Irish's head football coach. Vols cornerback Alante Taylor announced he will not play in the team's bowl game so that he can prepare for the Senior Bowl and the NFL Draft. He had been battling with injuries and playing through them. Former Saints and Titans safety Kenny Vaccaro retiring from the NFL after 8 seasons. He will be further exploring opportunities in esports. Taysom Hill will make his first start at quarterback this season for the New Orleans Saints, who host Dallas tonight on Thursday Night Football. Alvin Kamara is out for the Saints. You can hear the game right here on The Zone. And the Battle of the Boulevard tonight, Lipscomb at Belmont, 7 o'clock tip. Casey Alexander will be joining the Buck Reising Show here in about 15 minutes. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Well, the most successful streaming and podcast host in Nashville is in another continent, so they let us take over. Will Boling, Lucas Panzica with you. It is the Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone. Great to have you along with us, where we will talk with Casey Alexander, the head coach of the Belmont Bruins, coming up here in a couple of minutes as his team gets ready to take on the Bisons of Lipscomb in the newest installment of the Battle of the Boulevard. 615-737-1045 is our number if you want to jump in, where Lipscomb and CPA, Lucas, are a minute 22 away from halftime. Lipscomb leading CPA 7-0, as you heard Jonathan Schaefer just say in his informative sports update. Fun game so far.
Yeah, and this is the score CPA wants, right?
Absolutely.
1 possession, minute 22 removed from halftime. This is what Ingle Martin and the Lions want, as they're kind of creeping towards the red zone here. What looks like they're inside the 30, 35-yard line.
What are you doing with your first Friday night free tomorrow?
Prepping for state championship football on Saturday.
Yeah, I asked that knowing that was probably the answer.
Yep.
I don't know what. I think I'm just going to do all my prep like this afternoon and tomorrow just so I can say I had a Friday night free. Because as you know, we have not, like I told my friends the second week in August, right before we had our high school football media day, I said, all right, if you want to hang out tonight on a Friday night, hit me up the Friday after Thanksgiving. And until then, goodbye. It's like when LeBron James sends his tweet of signing off for the beginning of the playoffs. Yes, I just compared myself to LeBron James for broadcasting high school football. It's the first time that's ever been done.
I have to constantly remind people. It's so exhausting every week during the high school football season. Oh, is that Friday night? Yeah, no, I can't go.
Right. There's been birthday parties, weddings. Nope. Yeah. And I love it. We had a blast this year.
It's the best. It's also the best excuse.
Oh, it definitely is.
Right? Because more often than not, those are things that you probably would want to stay home anyway, but you don't have to.
So many times, my friends, because as you know, people in their 20s that live in Nashville, when your friends come in town or when there is a birthday, those are the times you are expected to be on Broadway.
Oh, yeah.
It's just an expectation.
Let's go to Hattie B's.
And just, oh, God. And I love Hattie B's. I'm not disrespecting the some of the fine institutions that are down there that I do love. But anyone who knows me at all knows that I think Broadway and I could not be a worse match. It's been such a good excuse of it's someone's birthday. My roommate the other day was like, why are we celebrating birthdays? A, why are we doing that, first of all? Second of all, why are we doing it in Broadway?
Well, that excuse is fair tomorrow because we've got state championship football Saturday morning. We've got conference championship football on Friday night.
Yes, we do.
Pac-12, Oregon and Utah, a game with no college football playoff implications. Utah blew out Oregon just last weekend, but we'll see what happens. Or 2 weekends ago.
One quick college football headline. Former Tennessee commit and Nebraska quarterback Adrian Martinez has entered the transfer portal. One of the responses on Twitter says this ends his 9-year career at Nebraska.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, because he was committed to Butch Jones.
Yes,
right?
he was.
Before he was fired.
Him and John Fulkerson started their college careers around the late 70s, actually. The late 1970s, those guys started in college. 615-737-1045, our number. So last night, Lucas, in college basketball, as we shift gears a bit, getting ready to talk with Casey Alexander coming up here in about 10 minutes. Penny Hardaway, Memphis Tigers basketball, well on pace to raise another NIT championship banner next season. This team has now lost to a team in Iowa State who was 2-22 last year. And yesterday they lose 72-69 to Georgia, a team that has not been good this year either. And Tennessee fans rightly took their victory lap yesterday on Twitter, Lucas, as they should, for a man who continues to underachieve at the University of Memphis.
What was the quote just the other day or after the game last night from Penny Hardaway?
So after the game last night, the quote was, "I'm really gutted from looking at this. We look like an AAU team. It looks really bad, and I don't really understand what these guys are thinking." Here's what I'm thinking, Penny. I'm thinking you're an AAU coach. That's what those guys are thinking. Crazy, I know, but this is a guy that had only ever coached in AAU, gets the Memphis job, and wow, his team looks like an AAU team. Crazy how that works.
Yeah, I remember talking to a couple of Memphis fans that I was mutual friends with around the time Penny Hardaway was hired, and the sky-high expectations and confidence in Penny Hardaway in Memphis because of what he did at Memphis East. So you don't understand. He won championships at Memphis East. He's going to win championships for the Memphis Tigers. That is not what you want to hear from your head coach. I have no idea what these guys are thinking. We look like an AAU team out there, devoid of answers against a Georgia team that is not a very good Georgia team. And I wonder when we have to start talking about Tom Crean on the hot seat. It just depends on how seriously Georgia is going to take Georgia basketball. That's not a very good Georgia team, and really it was a bad night overall for ranked teams around the country. BYU, number 12 BYU, loses in overtime to Utah Valley, who now 7-1 on the year. Florida, 14th ranked Florida, falls to Oklahoma. And then that Tennessee win over North Carolina looks just a little bit better as the Tar Heels knock off Michigan 72-51. Michigan been in a bit of a slide here in these last couple of weeks. But those are not things you want to hear from your head coach if you're a Memphis fan.
I think we could have a larger offseason discussion as well of how much does fit and geographical knowledge matter when it comes to hiring coaches. Because I think we could do a case study in this now with Ed Orgeron being let go, with Scott Frost back at Nebraska, with guys like Penny Hardaway, with Mike Woodson, the bane of Buck Reising's existence at the University of Indiana, Indiana University.
It's a good fit.
It's interesting to see these guys with Clark Lee at Vanderbilt.
It's a good fit.
It's interesting how we value fit and how we know, how we value people just knowing everybody's name within the building for head coaching jobs. I think this was something that Tennessee got caught up in far too much before the Danny White hire. Obviously, the biggest example of that was Philip Fulmer being hired for a job that he wasn't really qualified for.
Yeah.
To be the athletic director.
It's a good fit.
Right.
Right?
and Tennessee, finally, it feels like there are adults running Tennessee athletics on all fronts because they get a guy in Danny White to come in and just have a complete outsider's perspective of like, why are you doing things this way?
Yeah.
Why do these people have so much sway and so much say in what's going on here?
We throw the word fit out having no idea what it actually means for that particular program, right? Coach O was the perfect fit at LSU, but what couldn't he do? He couldn't hire good coaches after the 2019 championship run when he lost a lot of loses Dave Aranda, loses Joe Brady. He couldn't replace those guys. Brian Kelly can. There's a reason Brian Kelly's last two defensive coordinators are now head coaches at big-time college football level because he knows how to hire assistants. He's going to bring that to LSU. That in and of itself makes Brian Kelly a good fit. That's something they did not have in Ed Orgeron. We just have no idea the dynamics inside these programs at the top, the relationship between admin and coaches that actually define good fit. Like Philip Fulmer, a perfect fit at Tennessee as athletic director. Who knows the ins and outs of the University of Tennessee
where
and
the
its
bodies
football
are
program?
buried.
Who knows? Yeah, going back to the Sandra Bullock movie.
Yeah, right.
Who knows where the bodies are buried
Literally.
better than Philip Fulmer. But he doesn't know how to be an athletic director. So that makes him not a good fit. Brian Kelly knows how to be a good football coach. It's kind of a crazy stat, but Brian Kelly is the coach of the highest pedigree that LSU has ever hired. Higher than Les Miles, higher than Nick Saban when he came over from Michigan State. He had never won any national championships. So Brian Kelly is the best resume of any coach hired at LSU. To me, that makes him a pretty good fit at a program that expects winning football every year.
Yeah, winning is a great fit everywhere.
Yeah.
It's crazy how that works. It's interesting how we kind of use this one-size-fits-all approach to describe guys going back to their alma maters or people that know certain recruiting areas. Mike Loxley going to Maryland, an area where he knows, very, very well, and he can recruit Baltimore and D.C. I mean, it's not that simple in the world of college athletics. And the amount of voices that have a say in winning and losing in college athletics, I don't know why we are so naive to think that a guy just being from a certain area is enough to overshadow all of the different forces that are at play in just college sports. That's not even getting pro sports into the equation, because that's a totally different topic with different variables.
Kirby Smart, right? A perfect fit at Georgia. He played there. He's from there. He is Georgia football, but he's not a good fit because he's from Georgia. He's a good fit because he's a relentless recruiter. He has high expectations, a great eye for talent, and an elite defensive coach, and clearly what we've seen, a fantastic CEO leading a college football program. That's what makes Kirby Smart a good fit. The fact that he's from Georgia, knows the program, and played there is just a huge bonus when he's in the living rooms of Georgia players, high school football players in that state, trying to get them to come play for the Bulldogs. So it's going to, and we're going to keep hearing that term thrown out there more and more. Oklahoma still has yet to make a hire official. If they go for Brent Venables, well, it's a good fit. He's been there for years. You're going to hear that word popping up over and over when really we don't know what that means when you think about the actual dynamics of the program.
615-737-1045. Let's go to John quickly in Murfreesboro. Wants to talk about Penny Hardaway. What's going on, John?
What's up, guys? So Lucas knows me. I'm a diehard Memphis fan. I'm from Memphis and all of that. Now, there is certain criticism to go at Penny. He's doing too much positionless basketball. He's overextended his rotation. There's too many players getting not enough minutes, and some guys aren't earning minutes. But last night in that second half, they looked better than they've looked all season. They outperformed Georgia on every stat except the scoreline. All right, which matters. That's the only thing that matters. I grant you that.
Sure.
And he's got a lot of things to learn. He's got a lot of things to do. But the team is getting better. There's a reason they went on a 14-2 run at the end of the season last year.
Sure. Thank you for the call, John. I think it's a fair point, but devil's advocate to that would be if it's your best half of the season and you still lose to a 3-5 team, that's not ideal. It's not ideal.
Well, and there will be opportunities. I mean, Memphis will play an Ole Miss team that has struggled a little bit this coming weekend. They'll play a Murray State team next weekend, and then they've got Alabama, and then they've got Tennessee. There's going to be opportunities in the next couple of weeks for Memphis to show us what Penny Hardaway is building there. But that call from John, that shows me there's still some faith among Memphis fans in Penny Hardaway.
Nobody wins or loses their season in November or December, but when you've only made the NIT with top recruiting classes, that's kind of the only thing we have to go off of.
Well, you want to talk about bad losses yesterday, that certainly is one for Memphis, and that's going to hurt their NCAA tournament resume. But South Carolina falling to Coastal Carolina, that's a bad loss. That went a little under the radar there. Frank Martin and the Gamecocks falling to a Coastal Carolina team that hasn't exactly turned heads.
No doubt. No doubt about it. When we come back, we talk to the head coach of, maybe one of the best programs in Tennessee since he took over. You could argue that Belmont basketball is right behind Tennessee basketball in what Casey Alexander has done since he took over for the Belmont Bruins. Big game tonight in the Curb Event Center, Belmont and Lipscomb. We'll get Casey Alexander's thoughts on that and how his team has fared early on this season. Coming up next is the Buck Reising Show. Will Boling, Lucas Panzica with you right here on 104.5 The Zone. It's the Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone. All that's missing is Buck Reising, of course. Alongside Lucas Panzica, I'm Will Boling. Brett Batchelor making the show happen. Got to have you with us as we talk a little bit of college hoops here in hour number 2. And we are pleased to be joined on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline by the head coach of the Belmont Bruins, Coach Casey Alexander, kind enough to give us a couple of minutes as his team takes on Lipscomb in the Battle of the Boulevard here tonight at the Curb Event Center. Coach, great to talk to you. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We are good, and we are looking forward to following along with this matchup tonight against Lipscomb. We'll get into this matchup coming up here in a second, but, Coach, I first want to ask you about the ESPN Events Invitational. You guys go down there. You finish second to a really good Dayton team. You get great wins over Drake and Iona. What do you feel like you've learned about your team through that experience and through the first couple weeks of this season so far?
Yeah, the weekend in its entirety was a real test for us. I mean, 3 quality opponents, all 3 of which will be top 50, 7,500, level teams, and real grinds for each of those games. So pleased to come away with 2 wins. Wish we could have got the third in the championship, but didn't go our way. Learned that we've got what we need. I mean, we're not there yet. I don't think we've been good offensively yet this season, if you look at all cylinders clicking together. But I like our team, and this difficult schedule will serve us well.
And I know it's going to be a great atmosphere tonight for this matchup with Lipscomb. Always is a packed gym. One of the coolest events in Nashville to me across any sport. You guys have won 16 of the last 18 in the series, but 8 of the last 10 meetings have been decided by 9 or fewer points. You've been a part of this rivalry on both sides. What about this game makes it so close every single time it's played?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is one of those where you throw records out the window kind of thing. It's just a rivalry game. The familiarity with, between players and staffs is off the charts high, and it just makes for a fun game. Not all those games were pretty. Some were ugly, but it's a fun night just because so many similarities between the programs. Playing styles are very similar, recruit a lot of the same kids. And then just, the Nashville influence with a lot of people in this town and a lot of alums on both sides that really care about the game.
Belmont head coach Casey Alexander with us on 104.5 The Zone. Coach, when you look at this early season slate for both you guys and for Lipscomb, obviously you guys having made the trip down to LSU, having coached opposite Rick Pitino against Iona, winning that game, and then playing a Dayton team, falling just short last Sunday, a team that Lipscomb went up and beat a couple of weeks ago. You've got that common opponent. Both have had tough non-conference schedules early on. Do you feel like you know more about each other given the games that you guys have put on tape in the early part of the season, maybe more than you typically would at this point in the year?
Well, we definitely have some games under our belt, and that's some of that's a product of only playing once this season. Typically, we've played twice in most every year except for last year and this year. Which means one of those games comes early. And in this case, we didn't have that early game. So, yeah, we've got a little bit more to go on. But, I think there's so much familiarity already between the 2 programs. We follow each other closely and identify with each other really well. And, that's what makes it that's what makes it a really tough game is just, no surprises.
So Lipscomb, a team shooting the ball really well right now. You look at their loss against Tennessee Tech, 64% from the floor in that game. But they're out-rebounded 15-4 on the offensive glass. They lose the turnover battle 22-10. Did Tennessee Tech kind of spell out a way to beat the Bisons when it seems like they just can't miss?
Well, let's talk about how good they are on the offensive end with shooting percentages to begin with.
Sure.
I mean, they're literally first in the country in three-point shooting percentage and first overall in effective field goal percentage, which counts 2s and 3s. So, when they're able to execute their offense and play on rhythm, they're unbelievably good and hard to guard. So naturally, we've got to disrupt that a little bit, and that's what you saw in the Tennessee Tech game. They forced all those turnovers, took Lipscomb out of their rhythm. Really had, a little bit rattled a little bit, because they couldn't get anything going consistently in the second half. So I don't know if we'll be able to turn them over, but we've got to get somewhere close to that.
Belmont head coach Casey Alexander with us here on 104.5 The Zone. Coach, let's talk about your team a little bit too. Nick Muzinski, of course. I remember talking with you about him around this time last year, I think hosting a show at probably 3HL or something, and just asking about what's the next step that he needed to take. And it's been so cool kind of see him mature and see him grow over the course of his Belmont career. A guy that averages 24 points and 7 rebounds, earning him all-tournament team honors in the ESPN Events Invitational. Where's the biggest area you've seen him improve over your time with him at Belmont?
Yeah, he was incredible in that tournament, all 3 of those games, and then really in 4 out of our last 5 games, he's had those kinds of numbers. LSU doubled him on the catch, and they weren't going to let him get going, and he never did. But where he's improved is he's worked really hard. He's so talented, and he can score in so many ways. Sometimes he settles for 6 and 8 and 10-foot jump hooks. But where he's gotten a lot better is just using his length and getting the ball closer to the rim for much higher percentage shots. He's scoring at that clip, but he's also probably 65% from the floor from 2-point range in those games. And so if you get that many shot attempts and you're converting at that high of a percentage, that's a pretty significant weapon.
Well, Coach, I know that there's a lot of coaches around college basketball that would love to return 97% of their offensive production, like you're able to from last season to this season. But I'm curious, what makes this group different? I know every team, even with a lot of the same faces, can kind of develop a different personality and kind of a different identity. With a lot of the same guys, what makes this team maybe a little bit more unique or different from the team you had last year?
Yeah, and it is, even though we do return everybody, it definitely is different. On one hand, Caleb Hollander is one of those starters, and he's hardly been available to this point. He's only played, maybe 5 minutes total on the season. So we haven't had him available because of an injury, and he's working his way back. And then the nature of you're playing different teams. Your home and road games are different. The season goes differently. So no matter what, even with the same guys, it's a different circumstance altogether. Now what we have to depend on is their maturity and their experience, and just kind of a common belief, a common understanding of what we're trying to accomplish on both ends, and that kind of comfort for me as the head coach is pretty hard to replace.
Coach, when you look at this rivalry in its totality, going all the way back to the 50s, right, almost 150 total meetings, back to the NAIA days, you're a guy who's seen it at almost literally every angle, from a Belmont player to assistant coach to head coach, and obviously as the head coach at Lipscomb when you were there. How special is it for you personally to see this rivalry preserved through all the changes of college basketball, conference realignment, everything that comes with that? But Lipscomb and Belmont are going to play every single year in the Battle of the Boulevard. Just kind of curious what that means to you specifically.
It means a lot. I mean, it's been a part of my personal and professional life for a long, long time. So on a personal level, I mean, it's a game that you circle. It means more. I mean, it's you prepare the same way for every game that you play, but for Belmont and Lipscomb people on the Battle of the Boulevard day, you feel a little different, and that's a great thing because that's what rivalries are all about.
Coach, one more thing on the way out for you. I thought this was so cool earlier this season when one of your guards, Luke Smith, is named the coach in waiting at Knoxville Catholic as soon as he gets done. Have you ever coached a guy that knows that he's about to be a head coach too? What's that like?
Never heard of it. I definitely haven't coached one. I literally have never heard of it, but it speaks volumes about what people think about him. I mean, that's not some rinky-dink program either. Knoxville Catholic has had a lot of success, maybe state champion just a couple of years ago, and got some high-level players. And so for him to have been offered that job and to have been named that into that position when he's still playing college basketball, I mean, that tells you what kind of player he is, what kind of coach on the floor he is, and just how much respect basketball people in general have for him.
Well, now there's 2 head coaches within the Belmont program. Is he giving you pointers? Like, what's the dynamic there during practice?
Yeah, we got on the bus the other day after one of our games. He was sitting in the front seat. He's like, "Hey, I'm just trying to get ready.
That's awesome.
So it was good. The guys tease him quite a bit. They'll call him coach. Hey,
That's
coach.
awesome.
I'm subbing for you. Those kinds of things. So it's fun. But he's a great kid. He's been really good for our program. I'm happy for him.
Coach Casey Alexander has been our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. His Belmont Bruins in the Battle of the Boulevard tonight at the Curb Event Center. Coach, always enjoy catching up with you. Best of luck tonight.
Thank you, guys.
All right, that is Casey Alexander on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline. I think I can really identify and appreciate guys like that who have embraced what Nashville is as a sports city back in a different form, before Nashville was the Nashville it is today, and have adapted and have grown along with this city. And that's something I think specifically about Belmont that has been such a strength for that program and that athletic department. Belmont has kind of seized the opportunity to grow as Nashville has grown. And it's been kind of cool. I went to the Belmont basketball camp after they made their first ever trip to the NCAA tournament. I remember everybody wanting Penny Collins' autograph on their shoes and on their Belmont basketball T-shirts right before they go play, right after they played UCLA for the first time as a 15 seed. Like it's just so cool looking back and seeing how much that program and that university has kind of grown with this city.
And this rivalry, man, it's so much fun. And across the board, right? Not just basketball. You and I you've done a lot of Belmont soccer. I've done some Lipscomb men's soccer, men's and women's. And I got a chance to do the Battle of the Boulevard on the soccer field just a couple of months ago. And the way that people show up for that game, it is across all sports.
Yeah.
It's a big crowd to begin with. It was a really fun environment on a cold November night or October night. And then the crowd deeper into the second half got larger and larger. And I was like, what's going on? And my colored commentator said, well, they were playing each other in volleyball, just across the street.
Right.
Those fans came over here after that game. So it really does. They show up for every sport, every matchup. It's one of the more special things that we have in this town.
615-737-1045, our number. I think it's so interesting, the job of college basketball coaches this early on. It's kind of equivalent to the neutral site game in college football. When you're giving your guys kind of a taste of what postseason play is like, and you're trying to go through the motions from a college football perspective, you go to Charlotte, you go to Atlanta, you try to tell your guys, this is what a bowl experience is like. In college basketball, you try to work yourself up to, this is what it's like to play in an NCAA tournament, really more in a conference tournament. And for Belmont, where they'll go play in the OVC for the last time this upcoming March and try to simulate what that's like so early on in the season. But I feel like it'd be difficult, Lucas, to balance the emotions and the energy of wanting to put your guys through the steps of postseason while still realizing that the results don't matter near as much as they do in March. I think that's a fascinating job of what college coaches have to do early on in the season, because I remember coaches telling me in high school and in college, you've got a certain amount of emotional energy that you get to budget over the course of an entire season. And if you use all of it for your first couple games, your first couple matchups, it doesn't matter if it's a rivalry. You don't have anything left by the time it's actually time to play for a title. It's kind of an interesting process to me, the preseason tournament aspect of college hoops.
Yeah, well, most coaches, the biggest thing they can accomplish in those games is using them as a measuring stick, right? And for Belmont, you've got a pretty good source there when it comes to a measuring stick in the early part of the season. Opened up with an Ohio team that knocked UVA out of the NCAA tournament just last season. You went down and played an LSU team in the Power 5. You had to play Iona, coached by Rick Pitino, a really good Dayton Flyers team that, as we said, Lipscomb was able to go up and beat earlier in the season. And then after this, Belmont goes down to Birmingham to play a Samford team led by Quez Glover, an in-state product that transferred out from Florida, extraordinarily talented player. So they're seeing all types of players, all types of matchups in all types of conferences in this early part of the season. I don't know if there's much more you can ask as far as an early preseason schedule to do it in Florida, surrounded by the teams they were surrounded by, and now to put it to the test against your crosstown, really cross-street rival in Lipscomb.
So I talked to Casey about this last year, where this was part of the discussion in college basketball, because this is something that happened in Philadelphia, where Philadelphia now has, I believe, what has basically become a round robin of Philadelphia schools playing college basketball against one another. Please just take my money.
Yeah.
If you put in Bridgestone Arena, Belmont, Lipscomb, MTSU, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Memphis.
Let's put Tennessee Tech in there.
Absolutely.
That's a good basketball team.
A team that gave the Vols a run for their money and had a lead at halftime.
Team that was able to beat Lipscomb just the other day. That's a good basketball team.
I would love nothing more, because I'm all about events for this city that kind of encapsulate what this city used to be and what it is now. And there are not many of those events left. Right? The Music City Bowl has grown so much. It is, to a credit to them, become such a bigger event. It's getting better teams than it ever has. I mean, heck, they had Notre Dame LSU a couple of years ago and had 2 top 15 teams, I believe, in that matchup. You've got, of course, the Predators games that have kind of evolved over time, and so much feels different about this city. And I feel like college basketball for so long, I talked to my siblings about this who are in their 30s and older than me. Like, that was the other thing to do other than Titans games.
Yeah.
For so long. And before Titans game, it was the thing to do in Nashville, like on a Tuesday or Wednesday night.
But even in the NAIA days.
Absolutely.
Go back to the 70s and 80s, the way that gyms would be packed out for Belmont and Lipscomb. That's what I appreciate so much about this rivalry, and what, I've kind of been disappointed by when you look at Tennessee Memphis and the lack of consistency that rivalry has had, losing some momentum over the years, not playing each other. And I don't even like the spot we're in now where it's like one in Memphis, one in Knoxville, one in Nashville. Okay, what about after that? That's something that I want to be etched into the schedule each and every year. So I think something like what you're talking about in the greater Nashville area, just taking into account all the good college basketball programs that are in Tennessee, and there's a few of them, I think that would preserve some rivalries, and I think that would kind of create some new ones, really attract a lot of attention to college basketball in the state. But Belmont and Lipscomb are doing what, and it's easier. They're literally like 2 miles apart.
Right.
But they're doing what I wish Tennessee and Memphis would do every year.
Yeah, it's hard to compare. I mean, they don't share a street with the same name, and there's cultural differences between Tennessee and Memphis that don't exist as much between Belmont and Lipscomb because they are literally on the same street.
Yeah.
And so it is easier. But I certainly agree with your larger point that we spend so much time in rivalries these days. I mean, look at Bedlam between Oklahoma State and football that might not get played now because of a conference change. Belmont and Lipscomb changed conferences with one another. Lipscomb stayed in the Atlantic Sun. Belmont went to the Ohio Valley. Belmont will have now played in 3 different conferences, and over that span has still made sure that playing Lipscomb is a priority. And playing Lipscomb twice. I mean, they take 2 non-conference games most of these years to play Lipscomb. Of course, the pandemic kind of changed things up, obviously, like it did with everything else, but Belmont and Lipscomb are the model of this is a great rivalry for a great area, and regardless of conference realignment, it's something that they have prioritized to keep together, which I think is a larger discussion we could have around college sports, that's the biggest problem with all the conference realignment over the past couple of years and how many rivalries we have lost and how many more we will lose in the next phase. I'm proud as a Nashville native to know that this is not one of them.
No, I agree. Look, there's good college basketball in this state. It goes beyond Lipscomb and Belmont. It goes to Hersey Miller at Tennessee State. It goes to Austin Peay, where Nate James, who was the associate head coach at Duke last year, is now the head coach of the Govs.
I was going to say, too, get Austin Peay and Tennessee State involved in that,
Absolutely.
too. I was just naming the first off the top of my head, but you could have 12 programs in the state of Tennessee that are solid. Chattanooga, a program that's had some success. You send them down there. Gosh, I'm going to bang this drum as long as I'm in front of a microphone here about having a round robin of Tennessee basketball teams in Bridgestone Arena. It would be so much fun. So much fun. 615-737-1045, our number. I want to remind you that we are building a field of toys to benefit the Salvation Army's Forgotten Angels Toy Field, presented by T-Mobile. One of my favorite events 1045 The Zone puts on is Tuesday, December the 7th, coming up next week at Nissan Stadium, as always. While you are out doing your holiday shopping, remember those in need this holiday season. Pick up a gift for a senior or a toy and help us build a field of toys at Toy Field on Tuesday, December the 7th. For more info on that, you can visit our website at 1045thezone.com. Coming up, Lucas, we shift gears to something that has made me very stressed and very angry. Major League Baseball can't help itself in getting in its own way and marketing itself. And once again, Major League Baseball does what baseball does. They do their best to lose fans. We'll get into the newest work stoppage for Major League Baseball. Coming up next is the Buck Reising Show on 1045 The Zone. And here we have a song that you might not hear next spring. It's Buck Reising Show, 104.5 The Zone. I'm going to become the old man screaming at a cloud for a minute. And that's okay. Because when Buck Reising goes to a different continent, I talk about baseball in December. It's the Buck Reising Show. Lucas Panzica with you. Will Boling. Brett Batchelor, our producer.
Well, this is actually pretty in line with what baseball conversations are typically like on the Buck Reising Show.
That's fair.
Because they're typically just pointing and laughing at Major League Baseball.
That's very fair. That's very fair. Major League Baseball's years of labor peace, 26 years since their work stoppage is over. 9th work stoppage in the sport's history. Free agency is frozen. Player transactions are frozen. Players and owners bargained for 3 days in Dallas. One of their meetings lasted 7 minutes, which is somehow double what Brian Kelly took to tell his team that he was leaving for LSU.
Triple, in fact.
And he hit a triple. That's a good point. 11 weeks now until pitchers and catchers report to spring training on February the 16th. The owners lock out the players, and I'm sick about it. I really am. Freddie Freeman is still not a Brave because there's a lockout going on. I feel like us Braves fans have been robbed of what should be a victory lap of an offseason, and it has been no fun at all. No fun. There's the picture of Max Fried smoking a cigar and holding the World Series trophy, and since then, it's been downhill, and I'm not happy about it.
Can that not sustain you, though?
It can't.
How
because
can
none
that
of those
not-
players are back. Like, none of them have been re-signed except Adam Duvall. Literally the only one.
I think that would sustain me for a lifetime.
It hasn't, because my Braves fandom over my lifetime has been, how are they going to screw this up in the most dramatic way possible?
They just won the World Series.
And now it's like, how are they going to screw up the fact that they just won a World Series and this is how they've done it? Like, we talked with Grant Ramey about this yesterday, and I asked him, like, the same thing of, like, do we need to have the same counselor if Freddie Freeman becomes a Los Angeles Dodger? He was like, I spent all season saying, just win a World Series and I'll never complain again, and here I am, complaining. We aren't. No, but, like, if Freddie Freeman leaves to go somewhere else, which the more reports come out about this, John Heyman yesterday saying the Yankees want him but feel like they have no shot, which is about as good a news as you're going to hear from the Braves' perspective at this point, that he's not going somewhere else. But if Freddie Freeman goes to be a Dodger, then you feel like everything you just built is just gone.
And if that happens, you owe Joe Buck a full written apology.
See, but I don't. I don't think I do. Because in the moment, I don't care if he goes somewhere else. You don't say in the moment, right before a team is about to break a 26-year World Series drought, that, oh, could that be his last home run in a Braves jersey? You say it after the game.
That's poetic.
Oh,
it's
my
poetic,
gosh.
his last home run in a Braves jersey give them their world championship before he leaves for LA.
And he shouldn't have done it to Carlos Correa either of the Astros. I'll call it both ways. Because he did it for the Astros too, and I thought that was annoying.
But your argument at the time was that there was absolutely no way Freddie Freeman would not return.
And I still think there's about Chipper Jones went on a podcast with Jason Stark in The Athletic and said there's an 80 to 90% chance that Freddie returns. And I still think it's about an 80 to 90% chance. Like, I still think that this is going to be much ado about nothing, which Braves fans are good at. A guy on Twitch says, calm down, millennial boy. We're off to a hot start. Freddie will be back, and MLB will have a deal before pitchers and catchers report. You sound like hot take national punk. All right, guy who's not willing to put his real name on an opinion. Listen, let's sit down on the couch here. First of all, I'm not a millennial.
I was going to say, I don't think you are.
I'm Gen Z. I am the first year of the next generation. So, doesn't really help my cause here. No, this is something. This is something where random guy who doesn't have a name on Twitch doesn't know that Jeff Passan at ESPN wrote 5 years ago that when Major League Baseball extended their last collective bargaining agreement, it was setting up for a war in 2021. There are lots of things that have not been resolved through Rob Manfred, who is now on the record telling Major League Baseball to use different kinds of baseballs for primetime games so they have more eyes on them, a take that I know Buck would like. Of like, yeah, give me the juiced baseball for ESPN primetime games.
Yeah.
I know that's what most people outside of me want. But there is a lot that, paying minor league baseball players like $10,000 a year, stuff like that has been brewing and brewing and brewing, and I don't think we're going to have a full season of baseball. This is what baseball does. This is not a millennial take by me at all. This is a take of Kirby Allen Kirby, who says, I haven't watched baseball since 1994. They lost my trust in the last strike, and I haven't gone back since. Like, those people exist because baseball is so good at when they are doing well, they completely fumble. This guy responds back and says, it's Mark, and then he gives his address and says, come on by, punk.
Good. We'll handle it with maturity. I think there are a lot of people like that, and there's a lot of people our age that never really had the chance to have any trust for baseball because they didn't care in the first place, and that's a problem with baseball. For me, I enjoyed the abbreviated, and baseball people, traditionalists will hate me for this, I enjoyed the abbreviated 2020 MLB season.
I think a lot of people did.
I did not enjoy what caused it with the pandemic.
Right.
But I did enjoy the fact that you didn't have to slog through 182 games before figuring out who was in the postseason and all the what feels like countless meaningless games in the middle of the summer. Sleepy games, right, is what I call them. I like less of those. So for me, if the lockout pushes things back and gives us a shorter MLB regular season, I'm okay with it, and I say that not being an invested baseball fan in any way.
9th work stoppage for baseball. It was kind of interesting, though. Free agency was great on Wednesday. A one-day record of more than $1.4 billion were handed out in new contracts. Baseball did kind of back their way into a good thing of having what the NBA has, what the NFL has, of kind of one day of free agency mayhem yesterday because all these teams are trying to get deals done before that deadline of the lockout. I don't actually think Freddie Freeman's going to leave, to my new friend Mark, who wants me to come on by and fight him, apparently, on Twitch, where the praise is pouring in, as Buck Reising would say. But I'm speaking in hypotheticals, that if he did, it would feel like, I'm not saying it is, but it would feel like the celebration and the victory lap that Braves fans could be taking right now is just gone. It wouldn't actually be gone. I'm just saying that would be the feeling the day you see him in a different uniform. 615-737-1045.
I would let that sustain me for a very long time as far as my overall happiness. I think that would heal all wounds.
And I know I'm stupid for this opinion. I'll embrace it. I'll admit that it's kind of a dumb take, but I'm speaking on what it would feel like, not what it actually is. That's kind of what I'm getting at this point. Like, seeing him wear a different jersey would feel like, oh, everything you just did is undone, even though it obviously isn't. It's very interesting. Final hour of the show coming up next. Congratulations to Mark on Twitch. You only have to hear me for another hour because I know you're going to sit there and keep listening. Blake Toppmeyer of USA Today Network coming up at 12:20. We're going to get into the SEC championship, and we're going to pose the question to him that we started the show with on who he thinks got the short end of the stick in the college football coaching carousel over these past couple of weeks. It's the Buck Reising Show. 1 hour left, and it's 104.5 The Zone. Final hour of the show here on this Thursday. Appreciate you hanging out with us on 104.5 The Zone. It is the Buck Reising Show. Appreciate Belmont head coach Casey Alexander joining us in our last hour to discuss tonight's Battle of the Boulevard. Looking forward to that at the Curb Event Center. Excited to talk with Blake Toppmeyer of the USA Today Network. That is coming up here in about 15 minutes as we get ready for the SEC Championship, where, Lucas, we will have lots more discussion on that tomorrow here on the show as we close out your week. Alongside Lucas Panzica, Will Boling with you, where tonight, NFL Week 13, and really what felt more like last year's primetime matchups where we had so many just sleepy NFC East matchups. This kind of feels like one, too. Mike McCarthy out with COVID. Alvin Kamara out for the Saints again. Members of their offensive line out. You've got Taysom Hill starting at quarterback tonight for the Saints, who have a 4-game losing streak for the first time in 6 years. I don't really care about this game.
Yeah, and it's got some added NFC East flair to it, too, because Ben McAdoo is going to have a coaching role in this game because of the COVID, the way it's impact. I think he's with the Cowboys as an analyst, but he will be in the booth for the Cowboys tonight. So more NFC East layered into this matchup.
Is it bad that I didn't watch much of the game Monday? Monday was a secondary TV kind of Monday Night Football game.
What, the Seahawks, Washington?
Yeah, because there wasn't a Manning cast.
Nope.
Which we've grown so spoiled to having the Manning cast now. It doesn't feel the same for these games because I feel like the Manning cast has done such a good job of making us care about games we wouldn't otherwise care about in the NFL.
Because they haven't had a great primetime matchup yet, right? It feels like they've done a ton of Giants.
You had a couple of good ones. You had Ravens Chiefs. That was a Monday night game.
That's right.
You had that. You've had some Raiders. What was it? Raiders and Raiders Colts? No, Ravens Colts was the good one.
Yeah. The comeback.
That was before the Colts were good, though.
And I don't know if the Mannings were on that night.
I don't think they were. No, I remember that because the only reason I was watching.
I think they've missed the best Monday night matchups we've had.
They have. They have. 615-737-1045 is our number. I've never had less of a read on a SEC championship like I do on this one. And we're going to get into this with Blake Toppmeyer coming up here in a couple of minutes. But it's crazy. We mentioned this off the top of the show, Lucas, that Georgia has covered the spread every time they've played Alabama in Atlanta. And I am leaning towards a Georgia blowout in this game. I'm falling into the trap. I know I shouldn't do it. I know I shouldn't bet against Nick Saban. But I am thinking that's the direction I'm going to go in this game.
Well, we've been waiting for that bounce back, okay, there it is, performance from Alabama all season, right? On all three phases, dominant, going back to doing what they do, and consistently. But that's the part that hasn't been there. It's been the consistency since the loss to Texas A&M. I feel like we continue to see uncharacteristic mistakes. We continue to see Bryce Young troubled under pressure. That's what Auburn did all game in the Iron Bowl. Derek Mason sending pressure wave after wave, and it clearly affected Bryce Young. Stepped up, drove them 97, 98 yards, whatever it was in the end to force the overtime. And at that point, you felt like it was Alabama's game. But we've been waiting for the Tide to kind of wake up all season long, and players have done that. Bryce Young has been exceptional in most cases. He apparently is the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy in a year where there doesn't seem to be any clear-cut number one candidate. Will Anderson has woken up. I don't know that I've seen a better individual performance on defense in the last decade than what we're seeing with Will Anderson. And if Will Anderson isn't in the Heisman conversation this year, in a year where there's not, it's not the deepest quarterback class by any stretch in the NFL draft, then I don't think we're ever going to see a defensive player really in the Heisman conversation unless he's one of the elite punt kick returners in the country like Charles Woodson was. But we just haven't seen Alabama wake up when you keep expecting them to, because that's what they've done every year under Nick Saban.
A little bit of Tennessee news yesterday. Tennessee cornerback Alante Taylor, Coffee County's own, from Manchester, Tennessee, announced last night that he is declaring for the NFL draft. Will not play in Tennessee's soon-to-be-announced bowl game. He has already accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl coming up in February, saying that he wants to focus on getting healthy from a recent injury to be ready for the pre-draft process. A 4-year starter for Tennessee. Went through Senior Day last week. And Lucas, as a whole, I'm usually not a proponent for opting out of bowl games. But I feel like this is a guy who has earned the right to look out for himself, get ready for the Senior Bowl, and try to help his draft stock. A guy who stayed in state, who could have transferred when everybody else did, who had offers from Georgia, committed to Tennessee over Georgia originally when he committed to the Vols, back to Jeremy Pruitt's first recruiting class, right? When he first got hired, a guy
I do think he was committed to Butch Jones.
So he
was held over.
Yes, and he that was actually the story of he called Georgia to commit to Georgia, and nobody picked up the phone.
Right.
So then he committed to Tennessee.
Yeah.
Great story.
And I don't know that he would have played corner at Georgia.
No, he was a wide receiver most places, right. and Pruitt recruited him as a corner to Alabama, and I think got it right.
A quarterback at Coffee County High School.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun to watch him evolve over the last 4 years. And I think we're to a point where, look, the head coach Notre Dame just up and left in the middle of the night on the same week that they're going to find out whether or not they made the college football playoff. We're past the point of, I think, criticizing players for missing largely meaningless bowl games to get healthy and get ready for the NFL draft. I think we should come to a place where that is okay. You don't have to love it. You don't have to love that that's what college football has come to. But if you're going to direct that energy to players and saying they shouldn't be skipping out on bowl games, then direct that energy to coaches that are leaving as well. And I'm not saying coaches shouldn't leave in the middle of the night. This is the way it's structured now. The early signing periods in December, you have to make these moves, the money on the table, everything that goes into it. I don't blame Brian Kelly for leaving Notre Dame and starting up at LSU as soon as he possibly can after he got the phone call, because that's the way it's set up right now. That's the way it's structured. But on that same note, don't go after players for foregoing bowl games. Guys that are not making a iota of a percentage of what their coaches are making and are doing it for their health, doing what's best for them and what's best for their long-term career.
Here's the only scenario where I disagree is when you were in a New Year's Six or a traditional, if you're in the Sugar Bowl, play the Sugar Bowl, right? Play the Orange Bowl. I think so often players get caught up in the fact that if they're not in the playoff, then what's next is worthless. How much do we still talk about the Sugar Bowls? How much do we still talk about these teams that make it to an Orange Bowl, to a Sugar Bowl, to a Rose Bowl out west and in the Big Ten? Those are legendary moments for programs. And just because the system only allows 10% of the schools to actually have a chance to win a national championship doesn't mean that games like the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl are worthless.
I'm at a point where I think you can admire players that go through with that. Matt Corral was asked after the Egg Bowl if that was it. That was his final game for Mississippi State after setting a program record for wins in a regular season. 10-2, never been done before at Ole Miss. He said, no, I'm healthy. I'm going to play in the New Year's Six Bowl. I'm at a point where you can admire that and tip your cap, but also not have to criticize players for missing out.
Sure.
Because it's the same conversation with the coaches. And I know everybody has opinions on what coaches should or shouldn't do, but that is the option that is put out there for them. The option for Brian Kelly was leave right now. Let's get started. Let's build a national championship winning program at LSU. Notre Dame is officially behind you. Anytime coaching Notre Dame moving forward is time wasted in what you can have preparing for your tenure at LSU. And that's the timing of it all because of the way college football is structured with the early signing period. We've never had a week like this.
Yeah.
Right? A week like this where we have barely talked about conference championship weekend.
Yeah.
Election Sunday is this weekend, and we haven't talked about it. This is really the first time we've talked about the SEC championship because it's the craziest coaching carousel we've ever seen in college football, and it's happening days before the most pivotal games of these teams' seasons. So I think the way it's all set up, I can admire players that do go through with it, but I'm never going to criticize the players that don't because they believe that's what's best for them.
Mel Kiper has Alontae Taylor ranked 12th among cornerbacks in this year's class in his latest position rankings that he released last week. The Senior Bowl has really helped Tennessee players over the last 5 years. Trey Smith, Josh Palmer, Jawan Jennings, Darrell Taylor, all guys who I think have exceeded expectations at the NFL level based on where they were coming out of their last seasons at Tennessee. For the most part, I agree with you. I think the way college football is currently set up, when coaches are going to only think about their best interests, it's only fair to allow the players to do the same thing.
And I've seen this be pointed out. I saw Chris Lowe pointed out the other day, and you can have your opinion on it. Fans, that's one thing, but don't want to see coaches ever again on a podium chastising a player's decision to forego a bowl game.
Absolutely.
Where that same coach could get a phone call that would have him leaving town literally that day, because that's what's happened. So, and again, I don't blame these coaches. I'm not saying Brian Kelly is a selfish, bad person. That's the business of college football, but it has to work both ways.
It certainly does. And we wish all the best, of course, to Alontae Taylor, a guy that really has kind of been the face of really 3 different kind of regimes at Tennessee at this point. It's a guy that was on the tail end of the Butch Jones era, is there all the way through the Jeremy Pruitt era, and now for Josh Heupel as well, is a guy that goes to Hoover. He's the mouthpiece at SEC Media Days. Been a great leader for that team. I think he's earned the benefit of the doubt from Tennessee fans as he transitions to the Senior Bowl and beyond in the NFL. Coming up next, Lucas, we talk with Blake Toppmeyer of the USA Today Network. Tons of headlines to get into across college football, but we will begin with the SEC Championship as we begin to break down Alabama and Georgia coming up this weekend, a matchup with so many storylines and lots of future NFL talent. Blake Toppmeyer coming up next on the Buck Reising Show right here on 104.5 The Zone.
Now, a high school football scoreboard update. Presented by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office on 104.5 The Zone.
Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica. D2 state championship action happening in Chattanooga. Lipscomb Academy leads CPA 20-0 with under 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Mustangs looking to put the finishing touches on a perfect season. More private school finals coming up today. A 2 p.m. Central kickoff in D2 Single A. Nashville Christian and DCA going head-to-head, a rematch of the regular season finale, a game DCA won 7-3. In the nightcap, a 6 Central kickoff tonight, D2 AAA state championship. It is McCully against the MBA Big Red.
It's the Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone alongside Lucas Panzica, Brett Batchelor, our producer. I'm Will Boling. Talking college football coming up here in just a minute with Blake Toppmeyer of the USA Today Network. And Lucas, there is lots to get into with Blake around the college football carousel and the SEC championship here as well.
Like actual games to get into, right?
Yes.
Not just what does fit mean. Actual football games, conference championship games. We're going to find out who's in the college football playoff on Sunday. What fascinates you here, other than the SEC champ? Does that take the cake for you in the most interesting matchup? Because I think you can make an argument for a Baylor-Oklahoma State on that early kick, 11 a.m.
I think I'm fascinated to see how Cincinnati plays one step away from being the first G5 team in the playoff.
Yeah.
What is their margin for error? That's the question I have for Blake coming up here in a second, is that how – in what scenario does Cincinnati get left out? It's going to be interesting to see.
It's the biggest moment in their program's history, right? There's never been this much riding on a Cincinnati football game, conference championship, and a spot in the playoff on the line. So interested to see how they respond.
We are pleased to be joined on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline by Blake Toppmeyer, talking college football and SEC championship and more. Blake, good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing well. You guys?
We're good. Appreciate you giving us a couple minutes here. Just a little bit to talk about in the world of college football this week. Lucas and I were talking earlier in the show about the fact that this is a rare conference championship weekend where we've spent more time talking about different coaching fits and coaches moving around than we have actual games. And we're going to get into the SEC championship game coming up here in a minute. But do you remember a week like this before conference championship week with so much movement for head coaches?
I don't think so. No. I mean, this whole thing has been sped up the past few years in part because of the December signing period. I think that's a factor in play. But it is really, and I'm not the first one to express this, but it's so unusual to see a coach like Brian Kelly, leave his team when his team still has a shot at the college football playoff. A few breaks would have to go Notre Dame's way, of course, but it really has been an unusual cycle. And to see multiple established coaches, Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, leave Power 5 level jobs. I know Notre Dame's not a Power 5, but for all intents and purposes it is. For other Power 5 jobs, again, that's seeing two in the same cycle. It's pretty unusual.
It certainly is, and it has been a wild week across all fronts with Oklahoma, with Notre Dame, and with everything else that has gone on in between here this week. We were talking earlier, Blake, about if there's one biggest loser out of the college football coaching carousel this week. Lucas said Oregon, with Lincoln Riley kind of joining the Pac-12 at this point and making things so much tougher. I went with Notre Dame because in the short term and the long term, their chances of winning a national championship take a pretty big hit with Brian Kelly leaving. Do you feel like there's one clear-cut team that really got the short end of the stick this week in the carousel?
I think Oklahoma. I mean, I think Lincoln Riley is a really good coach, and for him to leave for USC, to me, it's a shot across the bow of Oklahoma's ego, right? I mean, that Oklahoma considers itself to be among the elite of the elite in college football, and then here they are. They're coming into the SEC in a few years, and there were reports, obviously, of maybe losing Lincoln Riley to LSU, and I think had that happened, if you're Oklahoma, maybe you can stomach it a little bit more because LSU, I think, is one of the very top jobs in America. It's in the SEC. You're losing to an SEC school. But to lose them to USC, I don't know. I think that's a blow to Oklahoma's pride, and I think it's a blow to its program, too, to lose a coach like Lincoln Riley.
Blake, what I love about this week is that the University of Florida has a new head football coach, and we haven't talked about it at all. It hasn't even been brought up. Billy Napier is the head coach at Florida. How fast can you win there?
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that that's flown below the radar because I think this might be one of the best hires of the coaching carousel. You know, LSU, they bought in on that established blue chip stock. You know, it's been a steady performer for years, Brian Kelly. There's not a huge risk of Brian Kelly just being a massive flop at LSU. Will he win a national championship? We'll see. But you know, he's not going to go out and pile up 3-9 seasons, I don't think. Billy Napier is more that stock on the rise. He's been steadily performing for a couple of years, but he's not at that blue chip level yet. And it's going to be interesting to see because if Billy Napier does really well at Florida and Brian Kelly struggles in any way at LSU, that's always going to be used against LSU, right? I mean, here was a guy who won 80% of his games in the Sun Belt, led Louisiana to the Sun Belt Conference Championship 4 years in a row. This is a program that's had, really very, very little success throughout its history before Billy Napier got there. And then he gets there, and it takes off like wildfire. And he's sitting 55 miles away from LSU's campus. They could have got him for much cheaper than they got Brian Kelly. They wanted more of the established coach. And so Florida swoops in and gets Billy Napier. I like this hire for Florida. You know, how long it's going to take to get Florida, quote unquote, back, I don't know. I mean, I think Dan Mullen showed that you can turn Florida around in pretty short order. Now, he didn't keep it there this season, but I don't think Florida's the type of job where you need to wait till like year 3 to expect big results. I think early on in a coach's tenure, you can expect some results. And one thing I like about Billy Napier, he recruited incredibly well at Louisiana Lafayette. Now, I know it's a different ball game recruiting in the SEC than it is in the Sun Belt Conference, but he's from the South. He's worked on Saban's staff at Alabama. He's worked on Dabo's staff at Clemson. He was raised in North Georgia. He played at Furman. Like, this is a guy from the South, and he's been a good recruiter. I think it's so hard to judge these things on the front end, but I think this is a good hire for Florida.
Blake Toppmeyer, USA Today Sports, with us on 104.5 The Zone. It's also hard to judge, and we've really hammered this all week, Blake, on all platforms. It's hard to judge fit, right, when it's a program that maybe you're not a part of, you're not involved in, and you look at it from a bird's eye view. And that has been the biggest thing to come up with Brian Kelly. It's got to be more complex than that, right? But I do want to ask you, besides the fact that he's not from Louisiana, that maybe the gumbo will be too spicy for him when he's sitting in a living room in Covington, Louisiana, or whatever. But to you, besides all that perceived stuff about fit, where could the potential shortcomings actually come when it comes to Brian Kelly not being a great fit at LSU?
Well, beyond fit, and as I wrote a couple days ago for the USA Today Network, I mean, LSU hired a big name coach. It didn't hire a big game coach. I mean, Brian Kelly has lost almost every game he was ever in. Big game, almost every big game he was ever in at Notre Dame. He was 0-2 against Nick Saban. He was 0-2 against Kirby Smart. He was 1-3 against Dabo Swinney. He's 3-5 in his career against Michigan. He's 0-1 on his home field against Cincinnati. He's got a lot of victories. He's an undeniable winner. He's won everywhere he's been, from the Division II level to Central Michigan to Cincinnati to Notre Dame. But if you look at his record in big games, it's pretty bleak. Now, the counter argument, obviously, is that it's easier to recruit to LSU than it is to Notre Dame. Notre Dame, with its academic standards, obviously, you're recruiting a different type of athlete to Notre Dame. But I do think that's true. I do think Brian Kelly is going to find a more favorable recruiting landscape at LSU. It's a state steeped in talent, and it's the only Power 5 program in that state. So I do think that's true. But what's also true is his schedule is going to get tougher. He's going to be finding himself in more big games, and this is not a big game coach. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Can that recruiting bump be enough to sort of erase his past in those big games? And the other thing I'll add, although it's not as easy to recruit to Notre Dame as it is to LSU, there's sort of this myth that's been created that it's like impossible to recruit to Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. When Charlie Weiss was at Notre Dame signed multiple national top 5 signing classes. It's not impossible to recruit to Notre Dame. It's not as easy to recruit to Notre Dame as it is to LSU by any means, but it's not impossible to recruit to Notre Dame. Now, Brian Kelly was a far better football coach than Charlie Weiss, but it just goes to show you can recruit top 5 classes at Notre Dame.
Blake Toppmeyer with us here on 104.5 The Zone. Blake, shifting gears to the SEC championship game. On one hand, you have a Georgia defense that looks invincible, but on the other hand, you have Alabama as a touchdown underdog. I have no idea where to go with this game. It's one of those where I feel like nothing would completely surprise me of really any outcome coming out of this game other than maybe Bama blowing out Georgia. But even that, we've seen the proof of concept for Alabama being an underdog to Georgia, albeit 13 years ago under Nick Saban, and blowing out Georgia in the famed black jersey game back in year 2 for Nick Saban. What is your read on this game? Because I have absolutely none.
Well, I think if you put the script A next to Georgia and if you put Nick Saban on Georgia's sideline, I don't think anybody would be really questioning the outcome of this game. I think it's those couple things there that may give you pause. I mean, Nick Saban is obviously the ultimate X factor in college football. And Alabama's got 2 things going for it, obviously. It has the sport's greatest coach of all time, and it has a Heisman frontrunner at quarterback in Bryce Young. You got those 2 things going for you, I think you have a chance. But I think Georgia's undeniably the favorite in this game. They've established it week in, week out. They're top to bottom, the best team in college football. They're college football's best defense since 2011. Alabama, they compare very favorably to that unit, and I don't think there's been a better defense since then. So this is the best defense college football has seen in at least a decade. I think Georgia's offense is actually a little underrated. It's not as good as its defense, but so much attention goes to that defense that we forget. Like, this is an offense that's been actually pretty good for Georgia. And if I'm an Alabama fan, my biggest concern in this matchup is they have 0 depth at running back. I mean, they only had 2 healthy scholarship running backs in the Iron Bowl. Then Brian Robinson gets injured, and now there's some doubt as to his availability for this game. It could be down to 1 scholarship running back. Beyond that, the offensive line at Alabama is not a typical Bama offensive line. Like, this is a unit that has struggled in many games this year, including the Iron Bowl. So if you're unable to establish a running game against that Georgia defensive front, and they know you're going to pass it on 90% of your downs, and that offensive line has shown some vulnerability in protecting Bryce Young, I mean, Georgia's going to be able to pin its ears back and really let loose on the pass rush. And I think that for Alabama, to me, that is the biggest concern in this game. Can they establish any semblance of a running game to help slow down that pass rush? And if they can't, can that offensive line turn in a Herculean effort and provide Young some pass protection? Because if they do, he's good enough to help Alabama pull out this game. But if he doesn't get protection, it's not going to matter what Bryce Young's going to do back there because he's not going to have time to do anything.
Blake, I feel like Cincinnati, for me, until I see a team from the G5 make the playoff, I'm always going to be skeptical about a G5 making the playoff. It's kind of like Tennessee winning in the swamp. I don't know if I'm ever going to pick it until I see it happen again. And now Cincinnati, with the biggest game in their program's history coming up this weekend, and Alabama going into this matchup with Georgia, how small is Cincinnati's margin for error? Is there a scenario you think where Alabama loses close and still gets into the playoff if Cincinnati wins?
I don't know if there's a scenario where Alabama loses close and they get in over Cincinnati. I think Alabama can still get into the playoff losing close, but I think they need some help in the form of at least one of the favorites, be it Cincinnati, Michigan, or Oklahoma State, losing elsewhere. I think if Alabama loses close and Michigan, Cincinnati, and Oklahoma State hold serve, I think then you would have Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati, and Oklahoma State. What's going to be interesting is what happens if Alabama beats Georgia. Both those teams are then in. Michigan holds serve, they're in. And then you have Cincinnati and Oklahoma State both win. Does Oklahoma State leapfrog Cincinnati and claim that fourth and final spot? I think they do. I think the committee has set that up to where if, with Oklahoma State sitting right there at number 5, they have a top 10 opponent in Baylor in the Big 12 championship. I think it would be very easy for the committee to flip those teams if Bama, beats Georgia and then Cincinnati's on the outside looking in. To me, that's the scenario in which Cincinnati gets left out. Either A, they lose, and then it's a moot point, or B, Alabama beats Georgia, the favorites hold serve elsewhere, and the committee then favors Oklahoma State ahead of Cincinnati for that final spot.
Blake, why do you think we haven't been talking about Oklahoma State as they sneakily build a great college football playoff resume? I didn't see them in the conversation remotely until the lead up to Bedlam last week.
I think the reason is because we've been lulled to sleep by Oklahoma in the Big 12. For several years, Oklahoma, it's been like a foregone conclusion. Oklahoma is going to win the Big 12, and Oklahoma is going to claim a playoff spot on behalf of the Big 12. And if for whatever reason Oklahoma stumbles, then the Big 12 is not getting a bid, right? And so I think we saw signs early in this season that Oklahoma was vulnerable, and then Oklahoma loses. And so I think the natural reaction was like, okay, well, Oklahoma's out, so the Big 12 is not getting a bid. and there really wasn't enough attention to Oklahoma State lurking in the shadows. You look at Oklahoma State's resume, I mean, it's really good. They've beat Baylor, they beat Oklahoma, they have just the one loss, which was on the road to Iowa State. I know Iowa State has not lived up to expectations, but that's still a team headed to a bowl game, and it was at their house. So at 11-1, Oklahoma State's resume is pretty darn good. But I just think it was because Oklahoma has been established as the overwhelming favorite in the Big 12 every year, and they claim the Big 12's playoff spot. And so when they showed vulnerability and then lost, suffered that first loss, I think we all just flipped the switch and said, okay, Big 12's out. When in reality, there was another good candidate kind of emerging from the shadows, and it just took most of us too long to realize it.
And I think my favorite part about all of that, of what you're saying, is with Oklahoma State, it's about their defense. Right? I mean, that's what we've been talking about in these last couple of weeks. Can Oklahoma score against this Oklahoma State defense? It's wild that we're talking about that as a factor in the Big 12 championship game. I don't know when that shift happened, but it feels like it's happened this year.
Yeah, I mean, its defense is back in style. Will it last? I don't know, but I admit I didn't know that we would see defense come back in style. After the last two teams that won national championships, LSU and Alabama, won with historically great offenses. That's not to say I didn't think we'd ever see good defenses, but just I didn't know that we'd see teams, at the head of the national championship conversation that were fueled by these throwback defenses and like ball control offenses, like Georgia basically is, and that almost sounds like a slight on Georgia viewed through like the lens of the last two seasons. But we've seen a lot of teams win national championships in the manner that Georgia's trying to do it this year. We just haven't seen it the last couple of years.
Blake, as we wrap up the regular season with conference championship weekend coming here in a couple of days, I want to ask you, because I know you were at a lot of them this year, what was the best game of the season in the SEC?
Best game of the season. I was at Texas A&M upsetting Alabama, so I'm a little biased because I was in the house there, and the scene at Kyle Field with the rushing of the field. I know we're not supposed to like that. The SEC levies the fines and it's dangerous or whatever, but come on, that was just a spectacle. If you love college football, night game at Kyle Field, one of the biggest crowds in program history and one of the biggest stadiums in the world. That was a pretty neat scene. I was at the Iron Bowl over the weekend, and obviously that was a very compelling game that came down to the wire. But it wasn't. I guess if you like kind of ugly, low-scoring football, then you love the Iron Bowl for the first three quarters. But that was an ugly game for the longest time. Whereas I probably give the edge to A&M upsetting Bama, but like I said, maybe I'm biased because I was in the house for that one.
Blake Toppmeyer has been our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. You can find him on Twitter at @BToppmeyer, SEC columnist for the USA Today Network. Blake, always appreciate the time, and we will do it again soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, that is Blake Toppmeyer on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline. I agree with him, and he pretty much echoed exactly what we said earlier in the show, that if you put the A on Georgia's side of the field, this just feels like another Alabama team.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Well, that's what he's done. I said it off the top. Kirby Smart was hired to build Alabama East. That is exactly what he did. Looking forward to see it play out as we watch Cincinnati commit quarterback Luther Richardson and Lipscomb Academy hoist the championship trophy, beating CPA. What was the final there? 27-0.
27-0
in Chattanooga. So congratulations to Trent Dilfer and the Mustangs. Looking forward to seeing how Richardson's future team plays out against Houston in the AAC Conference Championship. By the way, for me, it's Arkansas Ole Miss. Best game of the season.
Best game of the season? Yeah. I would have said the Iron Bowl.
Iron Bowl was fantastic.
A 4-overtime, 2-point conversion penalty shootout between two old rivals.
It is the football equivalent of a penalty shootout.
It's the worst. I hate everything about it. Coming up next, we will close out the show, recap everything what we have talked about over the last couple of hours, plus one program that is on Vanderbilt's schedule for next season has let go of their head coach. Some breaking news in the college football world. We'll get you that. Get you on your way for Blaine and Mickey. Final segment, Buck Reising Show, coming up next on 104.5 The Zone.
Now, a high school football scoreboard update. Presented by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office on 104.5 The Zone.
Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica. One state championship game in the books in Chattanooga as Lipscomb Academy defeats CPA 27-0 to win their fourth ever state title in D2 AA. The MVP, Boston College commit running back Alex Broom, 20 carries, 137 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Coming up in D2 later today, kicking off in about an hour and 15 minutes. In D2 Single A will be DCA and Nashville Christian. And then tonight, it will be McCallie and MBA. The D2 AAA State Championship in Finley Stadium, a 7 p.m. kickoff.
Final segment of the show here on 104.5 The Zone. Been a fun one. Here on the Buck Reising Show. Alongside Lucas Panzica, I'm Will Boling. Special thanks to Blake Toppmeyer, Casey Alexander for joining us here today. Lucas is a renaissance man today. Well, he always is, but especially today. You're going from co-host to scoreboard updates and back to co-host pretty quickly.
Just another day.
Another day. That hat rack behind you. You're putting on so many different hats. just cycling through. Steve Adazio is out as Colorado State's head football coach after just 2 seasons. That's odd to me. But you look at that team, they finished 3-9 this season. They lost their last 6 games, team that lost to Vanderbilt this season as well. He was ejected from the season-ending 42-point loss to Nevada. That's a good way to go out, I guess.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it. That feels like a coach that knows his time's pretty much done, right? And then just kind of just letting it all fly there at the very end. 4-12 in his time at Colorado State. I struggle to think of a more boring head coaching hire than Steve Adazio, and with where we're at right now in college football, go hire someone fun. Colorado State, go hire someone fun and go win that conference. That's a program that we've seen play at a high level with Jim McElwain and Mike Bobo up there. I mean, we just broadcasted one of the best football games you and I have ever seen in person with the Colorado State commit at quarterback, Jake McNamara, Page High School. He's playing for a state championship.
That's right.
This weekend, first ever for the Patriots program. Certainly good luck to them as they face Walter Nolan and Powell out of East Tennessee. But yeah, go hire somebody wide open offense, high flying, high scoring, entertaining with Colorado State. Because Steve Adazio, man, 4-12. You got to think his run is pretty much over as a head coach.
It's always a weird pivot when you go from the state championship football games on My TV 30 to the Jerry Springer show. That's what's happening in our studio right now.
Well, this isn't post-game coverage?
I can't. Yeah, Jerry Springer, not in fact the studio host for the Blue Cross Bowl. I can't think of a more dramatic shift to a man that is now, I don't know what's happening. We've got very strange things happen. That's what I guess the Jerry Springer show is. Very odd shift from watching Trent Dilfer and Ingle Martin, 2 of the best programs in Tennessee, play high school football, to this.
To Bobby, who is apparently dating 2 strippers that don't like each other.
Congratulations to Bobby. Good Lord. That's a very, very strange change. Talking a little bit about high school football, we could kind of wrap up our season as well. We talked about that earlier. 8 different teams who played on the 104.5 The Zone Game of the Week will be playing this weekend in Chattanooga. 2 of them just played. The next 2 coming up, you mentioned Nashville Christian, you mentioned DCA. 2 programs that we saw play each other. One of the 2 rematches that we get from the Zone Game of the Week to the state championships. You got Page, Oakland, and Summit playing as well. NBA tonight against McCallie at 6 o'clock. You start at 104.5 The Zone, and then you make your way to Chattanooga. This is the path. It's a logical first step.
I do love that about D2 high school football in Tennessee, the amount of rematches you get for the state championship and the dynamic that adds in preparing for an opponent. Lipscomb Academy beat CPA 38-0 on their home turf earlier this year, maybe a month or 2 ago, and now 27-0 in the state championship. DCA beats Nashville Christian 7-3 in the regular season finale, a game we broadcasted on The Zone. A slog, right? Rain, mud. I mean, those jerseys pretty much went from white to brown by the end of the night. 7-3, the final score, DCA won. Now they play on a beautiful day on a turf field in a great facility at Finley Stadium for the state championship just a few weeks later. So I always love how that impacts sort of the dynamic there because you can't go about that game the same way you did last time out. So good luck to both teams. Nashville Christian DCA D2 single A state title coming up here in about an hour.
So how about this from Ian Rappaport a couple of minutes ago? This was from NFL Now earlier today, about 30 minutes ago. Seattle Seahawks, of course, yesterday they add Adrian Peterson, Titans legend, to their practice squad. Ian Rappaport on NFL Now says the Seahawks signing Adrian Peterson, another sign they are in win now mode. No. First of all, another sign they are in win now mode. First of all, no disrespect to Adrian Peterson. A terrific guy, does a lot for the community and wherever he goes, and a one of the all-time greats. First of all, a 3-8 team is not in win now mode. Let's start there. The Seattle Seahawks are 3-8. If I'm a Seahawks fan, I don't want to be in win now mode. I want to be in, all right, who's the best left tackle that I can get to protect Russell Wilson and try to keep him from entering the transfer portal of the NFL. Secondly, Adrian Peterson, come on. Not a guy you get to win now.
It's been a tough year for Russell Wilson.
It really has. Really has.
He just hasn't been good. I mean, straight up. This has not been the Russell Wilson that we all know. And that's before the finger injury. You think about the Titans where he had 2-3 opportunities for that signature game-winning drive. Didn't happen. Hasn't been the same since he came back from the injury either.
Something I want to get into tomorrow, Lucas, here on the show. Tennessee and its possibilities for a bowl game. Let's go ahead and tease this topic for tomorrow as we kind of live produce our week of shows. I think you could have an interesting discussion of should Tennessee really want to play in a Florida bowl game? With 13 SEC teams making bowl games, you're going to get SEC teams playing higher up than they typically would because there are more SEC programs and less of everybody else in the mix for bowl games. I'm interested to know where Tennessee fans want to go because the list of mid-state recruiting prospects that Josh Heupel has missed out on in this cycle, Mark Stoops has cleaned up in Nashville. Got 3 of the best players in Barryon Brown and Destin and Keaton Wade out of Pearl Cone and out of Summit. I'm interested to know if Tennessee fans, like me, would rather the Vols be here in the Music City Bowl in Nashville or if they'd rather take a Florida trip and go down to Tampa or Jacksonville.
Yeah, it depends on the line of thinking, right? Because there's a lot of fans that are very much in been there, done that mode and playing a Big Ten team in Florida or playing an average Big Ten team in Nashville. We want to go to Charlotte, right? Want to play Clemson in the Belk Bowl, or the Duke's Mayo Bowl.
Yes.
I guess at this point it wouldn't even be Clemson's kind of worked their way past a bowl game of that stature. So I guess what would it be? I mean, play a Wake Forest or something like that.
Yeah.
In the Duke's Mayo Bowl. So I think
Forest.
there's fans that just want to see something different. And then there's fans that are in line with whatever the coaches believe will put them in a more advantageous spot in terms of recruiting. And I think Nashville would have to be near the top of the list when you think about the environment that you'd be able to produce. And you could do that anywhere, but especially here in Nashville.
The thing I want to talk about tomorrow, where teams went the year after they went to the Music City Bowl. I feel like this has become a pretty good game for programs to take the next step and be a stepping stone to something bigger. And the Music City Bowl has entered that same tier, obviously, as we know, with Outback, with Gator Bowl, and they've become a big part of this equation. So we'll get into that tomorrow and continue our SEC championship preview. Fun show. Good to have you back in the building, Lucas.
Good to be back.
Tomorrow we will do it all again, 10-1 with me and Lucas Panzica to get you closer to your weekend. Coming up next, though, Blaine and Mickey have you covered for your Thursday. They've got John Glennon, Doug Matthews talking Titans, talking a little bit of Vols. They will continue your Thursday. That's all our time. For Lucas Panzica, Brett Batchelor, I'm Will Boling. We'll talk to you tomorrow right here on 104.5 The Zone.